Welcome to Daredevil in the Details, a show that explores and dotes in the philosophy and themes of Disney's Daredevil Born Again, a digression collection brought to you by A Method to the Madness and the ZeroIndent Patreon subscribers. I'm author DC McNeil, and this week we are talking about two of the most predictable episodes of the show so far, a real who's who of setup and payoff from the writer's room. I'm joined as always by Patrick from A Method to the Madness. Patrick, what's all that paint doing on your hands, dude? You been doing graffiti and blood again?
Well, Bert needed some assistance with troubles on Sesame Street. Just needed to help out my boy.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, suspicious, but
Yeah.
okay. I have to take your word for it.
No one on Sesame Street snitches. I'll say that.
No snitching on Sesame Street. Yeah, that's a known fact
No.
about Big Bird. Zipped up lips, that man. And of course, we're joined once again by Darth, the smuggest man on the podcast, who called yet another shot this week somehow. This is unbearable to me. Darth, how does it feel to be correct again? And, what would you like to say to the people who doubted you? Because last episode you said, I don't know, if Matt's supposed to be traumatized by Foggy, then why don't we see any, flashbacks and interiority of him being traumatized? And it's the first thing this episode opens with, so...
It's funny because there was something else I thought you were referring to. There was something else that I actually pointed at the screen and I was like, called it. So we'll get to that later.
So you're double smug. Cool.
Yep.
I was literally yelling at my TV because that piece of feedback that you gave for that story that we were talking about, we were like, I don't know, how do you know he's traumatized? It's
yep.
I was like, man, I got the absolute L on this one. I almost swore, but it's the first 2 minutes, so I resisted. But yes, tough. Look, yeah, these two episodes we're talking about, Daredevil Born Again, episodes 6 and 7. These are probably the two weirdest episodes so far in that they're pretty short, they're pretty punchy, and they're just... I use the word predictable. I don't know if that's I don't mean that... That's not predictable dash derogatory. That's predictable dash descriptive. They're just very tight and contained, and they do exactly the thing they set out to do, with some kind of pretty predictable complications that we'll get into. I guess high-level thoughts around the horn. But sort of at the pointy end of things, right? So we've got... next episode, we're talking about episode 8, and then we're talking about the finale separately. The reason I've separated those is I figured that it would be a good way for us to try and take a step back and get a holistic view of the series. Try and have that method work for us rather than us just reacting. But yeah, let's start with you, Darth. What was your vibe? These are two real action-heavy episodes, so I figured it was sort of Darth catnip in some ways.
Yeah, very much so. Especially with the fact that we had some heavy fight scenes, and one of my things being paying a lot of attention to the fight scenes, and then in the first one I was like, I hate this. This doesn't make sense. Why is this happening? And then fast forward to the next fight scene, and I'm like, oh, the dialogue leading up to this explains what annoyed me the last time. So problem solved. Although at that point I'm like, is it okay to retroactively explain the villain's prowess after you see it the first time? Because you've already spent a week or whatever after you watch the first episode before you see the second episode, and you're spending that whole week going, how did he know how to do blank, before you get it explained in the next episode. And Rye is always talking about dropping those hints beforehand instead of after the fact, and that really hit me with Muse and his karate training specifically.
Is that because I think one of the things Rye always talks about is it's that question of does it make sense for this person to know how to do this thing? And I think we don't have enough information about Muse to know one way or the other during that first fight. That's kind of my feeling on it anyway.
It rolls back to the complaint that I had about the bank robbery scene, or that entire episode, where they either bumped down Matt's fighting prowess, or they increased everybody else's. And then they seemingly did the same thing in this episode, where he's just fighting this random dude that's a painter, and he's an equal match to Daredevil,
Right.
who was trained by like literal assassins.
Mhm.
And so 2 episodes in a row, him being on equal combat footing with normal people, that had like I was already watching for it because of the bank heist.
Mhm.
And
I
they
mean,
explained it in the next episode.
it's a known
It's not
fact
the worst thing
that,
ever.
that graffiti artists all know kung fu. I don't know about, do they not do that in America, or is that just an Australian thing? Unclear.
Yeah, that was so on my mind as well, Darth. Like, because you said it last recording, and I was like, man, like, yeah, they really they really scaled that down to whoever he's fighting.
Mm.
But then on a rewatch, which I did like literally just before this recording started, and I went back and I watched that first fight, and specifically because I've taken Taekwondo and I was watching the moves that Muse was using, and like immediately, yeah, like now I can identify, yeah, that's a someone who's practicing Taekwondo. You know, it's not Aikido, it's not jujitsu, it's not any of these other things. Like everything that I was seeing was very much something that I would have recognized if I had been giving them credit for, you know, this is not just a random dude like the other random dudes were in the previous episode.
It's funny you say that because I recognized a Taekwondo move and I was like, oh, that's Taekwondo. But like one, and I'm sure it all was. I don't know enough about it. That's funny.
But you got it and I didn't though, so that's a big win.
That's a dub for me.
You get to hold that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get to hold that over me.
Yeah, I mean the interiority thing makes me crazy. That you got that right. Patrick, what about you? What's your vibe on these 2 episodes?
I wasn't super hot on these episodes. I'll be honest. It's really starting to create a rift between the Netflix series and this series for me. And you know what I miss is from the Netflix days, like the fight scenes they were charged with 2 or 3 episodes of this like complex setup. And I feel like this show is starting to slip a bit into like contrivance for me. And I feel like I can really feel the rewrites in like happening here. And I don't know, maybe the Disneyification, like, you know, the need to sort of have these it kind of feels like the show is built around the fight scenes, and I'm not entirely sure that that's how they did it in the Netflix days. I feel like it was sort of the other way around.
Yeah.
I feel, as you say, like David, I think, you know, it's these episodes are the head of what the season has been building to. Like, you know, everything makes sense. You know, it's the it is the payoff to what it's been setting up, but I just kind of feel like it's something is just not as great. It makes me miss the Netflix one.
Yeah, I had a similar feeling. There's a kind of there's a dynamic range this show lacks at times that drove the Netflix vehicle. You know, that first if we just take that first season in particular, and I hate to be the like, oh, comparing it to the old one, but like I think it's like a healthy exercise here to try and demonstrate the way I feel about it in a very similar kind of note, Pat, is that yeah, that original show had a much broader dynamic range of the types of scenes and tones it could achieve and where it was able to deploy them. And it was able to do that with these big slow build-ups and these kind of micro payoffs and these micro tensions. And this show, while it has nuance, I think it really struggles to find space to broaden that dynamic range, and it ends up with this kind of single aperture, which is like, okay, Fisk is this type of character. He talks about his childhood when he's doing like rhetorical stuff. This guy's a serial killer. This is his 3 or 4 character notes. There's something inorganic about the way that the show feels, and I think that's the contrived is the word that you use, Pat. I think it's dancing around the way I feel, but yeah, this season doesn't seem to have the space to do some of the things that made the original really interesting, which is like, you know, in that first season, you have that entire episode where it's just Daredevil and one of the Russian dudes in like an abandoned building during like the stakeout. And it's just them having an argument with each other for an entire episode while Fisk is on the radio. Like, there's no room for stuff like that here, and that's really what I feel is lacking. Is those longer, slow moments where we get to sit with these characters in an experience. You know, there's a moment here where you think that, oh, like Matt, like in these episodes where you're like, oh, Matt is gonna have to, like, it'll be him versus the police versus Muse, and like that just doesn't happen. And it's like, oh, that seemed like the obvious setup for what you guys were doing. And like that could have been like a whole 2 or 3 episodes of the previous, you know, of that first show. And here it's just no, like it's one action scene and then it's done. Yeah.
That's super well observed. Yeah, I think you're right. And yeah, like the episodes like from season 3 with Fisk looking onto a dramatization of Dex's childhood and stuff like that is so not what this show is doing. And I'm not saying that's what it should do, but like, I think you're absolutely right. It just, because the show is just so focused on its primary objectives, and it feels much more narrower than the wide range of tones and feelings we got from the original series.
Yeah.
I want to make a guess and see what you guys think about it, that the previous seasons, the fights were all very character based, meaning that it wasn't just we need an action scene. It was very much like this character has a very integral reason to fight this other character, whereas in this season the fights are plot points. Like they have to happen to move something forward, but it's not like Matt cares about this bank robber that he's fighting. It's not like, you know, he finally gets to go against Fisk, or he finally gets to fight Elektra, or there's nothing personal. It's not character relations in this season. The fights are just part of the whatever plot is going on, and so that drains a lot of that emotionality out of the fight that we're very much used to having.
Yeah, like his fight with Muse, like it isn't about Muse. It's about like it's because it just happens that the person he's dating is like the one who's being held hostage by Muse. You know, it's like it's not really a relationship between Matt and Sebastian. Is that his name?
Bastion.
Bastion, yeah.
I think it's yes, and it's also that every fight is about the same conflict, which is Matt's internal conflict about Daredevil and Foggy. It's not just that there's not room for those like sort of character driven and character motivated moments. It's that every fight is driven by the same character motivation to produce the same character moment. You know,
why would he have internal conflict about Foggy? Is he like traumatized or something?
Shut up. Let's do the summary. God damn it. Okay. We are first talking about episode 6, Excessive Force. It's the disrespect. Directed by David Boyd and written by Thomas Wong. There's a bit of a longer summary, but there's a lot of plot. So, Patrick, when you're ready, could we please hear the summary for episode 6?
Matt and Heather start their morning, and we learn Heather's new book is about vigilantes. He asks Matt if he can set her up with the Punisher or Daredevil, maybe. Meanwhile, Fisk deals with an unwelcome visitor as Luca shows up in the mayor's office to tell Fisk he won't pay the $1.8 million to the Irish. Fisk threatens him, but Luca leaves unimpressed. Angela visits Murdoch and McDuffie to tell Matt that Hector was investigating a series of kidnappings along Track 61 near the old Q line. Fisk is told that the mural depicting him as kissing the arse of a bull made of money was painted in blood. This spirals into the revelation of Muse, the graffiti artist and serial killer with over 60 victims. Later, Fisk heads to a fundraising event to beg New York's wealthy to find to fund his port expansion, only to have everyone throw his self-serving interest in his face. Cherry visits Matt to deliver the news about Muse. The news about Muse. Begs him to let the police handle it.
The Muse
but Matt's
news.
the Muse news, if you will. Begs him to let the police handle it, but Matt's head is swimming with Angela's plea. This is what Hector was investigating. This is what Angela wanted help with. Fisk puts together his own secret police, allegedly formed to stop Muse, and sends them into the city with military hardware and no body cams. Angela heads to the queue line to investigate Muse. When Matt hears Angela is missing, he says, "Fuck it," and dons the new Daredevil armor. Muse captures Angela, prepares to drain her blood. Meanwhile, Fisk descends into his dungeon with an axe. Both Matt and Fisk cascade into their true selves. Daredevil beats Muse bloody, and the Kingpin punches Adam's skull until the man is dead. Muse escapes as Matt saves Angela. Daredevil has returned, and the Kingpin is bathed in the light of a corrupted god.
So, you wouldn't believe it from that summary, but this episode is 30 minutes long. This is a short outing.
Really?
Yeah, true.
It's short. Wow. Isn't that weird? Yeah. Okay, let's start at the start, because that seems like a good place to begin. What? That's not the saying. Fucking hell. What's the thing? It's the only way to begin. It's the start is the start. The only way to begin is by beginning. Whatever. Look.
The only way to win is by learning, and the only way to begin is by beginning. So without further ado, let's begin.
There's two things before we get into Doug's. Jesus, I'm losing my mind. Darth's smugness. The first thing is I'm on tilt, boys. I'm on tilt. The first thing that happens is we get Matt, who gives us the bit. He gives us something about Ives, which we'll touch on in a second. But there's also we learn that there's a serial killer. He's cutting out people's eyes and he's draining their blood, and he's sort of using their blood as like the base with his epoxy for his paint. I asked Mum about this because she used to be a chemistry teacher, and she's like, yeah, this sounds like you could do it, so this isn't like entirely fiction. I'm not saying do that. Let me rephrase. This is a feasible thing that could happen. ZeroIndent as a company does not legally endorse infusing blood into graffito unless it's your own blood and it's fully consensual. Like, I don't want to tell you how to live your life.
I just love that you're like, I need to research the blood. Let me ask my mom. of course.
Bro, I bet you if you text Eric and you're like, what is the weirdest thing you've researched for a story? It wouldn't even come close to like, can you put blood in graffiti? Authors, we have some fucked up search histories, dude. Now, did either of you clock the graffiti that, you know, the big mural that they're cleaning and what it depicts, of Fisk and the bull? And did either of you put together the meaning of this thing?
I just it was just that Fisk bows to greed and money is basically all I took from that.
I'm trying to remember if there's some phrase that has to do with like standing behind a bull or something, but no, what are we missing?
I mean, Pat's pretty much onto it. It's not that complicated. It's like you glance at a theory book or like, you know, sort of, it's not the deepest depiction, but yeah, it's Fisk, and he's sort of, yeah, it's got kiss ass and he's leaning and he's basically kissing the ass of a bull that has the $1 bill on it. And the $1 bill is shaped by the outline of like the bull, and that bull is like that's like a capitalist piece of imagery that's kind of used to depict like strength and idealism. Bulls are like a Randian symbol for like strength and things like that. And the irony is that he's kissing the ass of a bull that's a $1 bill. Like, it's not even worth anything. He's just that obsessed with money. That's how small of a man he is. And he's wearing a crown as well. It's that quote that we talked about, which is like, that's why they call it, it's money. That's why they call it money. Like, it is in and of itself, and it's self-completing. And this is how pathetic Fisk is, type of thing, which you get that from even just like the kiss ass bit. I just, again, I don't know that you can do anything more extreme with this type of imagery in a show like this being run by Disney. It seems like only something like Andor gets a free pass on this stuff at the moment, but it did remind me that this show is clearly thinking about its politics. It just doesn't, it's not really allowed to do much with them, or it isn't willing to do much with them. I did just notice that, wanted to call it out.
I mean, to be honest, I'm surprised they did this much.
Yeah.
Or that Disney allowed the creators to do this much. I, highly doubt that it was the execs at Disney that were like, yeah, do this. Because, I mean, it could literally be like the wrath of the government raining down on them if a certain someone doesn't like the depiction in this show.
Yeah. And it paints a portrait of a pretty pathetic man, just to be honest with you. Like, this, I'm talking about Fisk, right? This Fisk, he's really reduced. He keeps trying to do these old Fisk moves, and no one is buying it. Like, he postures and he does this and he does that, and like, when you have that scene with Luca's like, what do you mean? Like, who are you anymore? There's a real sort of a real gormlessness that they paint him with, which is really affecting to me. But yes,
I think possibly Fisk thinks like Fisk is on the reverse train of thought. Like everyone else is thinking they see through Fisk, trying to gain more power through legitimate office. Whereas Fisk is like, everyone thinks that I'm lowering myself with this mayor position, but they don't see the bigger game I'm playing, kind of thing.
Oh, sure. Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's that kind of He imagines people perceiving him one way, but then but actually maybe they're right. Like I don't know. Okay. Let's quickly talk about Darth being right, I guess, or whatever. So, Matt, we opened the episode with Matt in this really just he's been in a bad place the last two episodes, but this is really he's really quite rattled here, and he's holding what did you call it, Darth? The funeral card or the funeral something? The thing from Foggy's.
Yeah, I pretend I remember.
I keep losing the word for it, but the memorial's the thing from the funeral. And it turns out that the what he ended up going with was St. Ives, which I'll give you a little bit about St. Ives, and I'm going to ask a leading question, which I know neither of you know the answer to. So he goes, "Thou did establish St. Ives as a judge in the midst of his brethren, making him a friend and advocate of the poor. Do thou make us by his intercession steadfast in the pursuit of justice, confident in that merciful goodness. Through Christ our Lord, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit. Amen." Do either of you know this full St. Ives? I assume no, right? Like you're not familiar?
Well, I researched him after this, so yes, a little bit.
Well, do you want to talk a bit about St. Ives?
So he's the patron saint of lawyers. And interestingly, he's the only person to be canonicalized like past the Middle Ages, in the 13th century. But basically, he was a super righteous defender of the poor, and so basically, the parallel with Matt is that he represents and gives really good representation to people who otherwise can't afford it. And that was St. Ives's MO. He just wanted to. He was truly altruistic kind of thing.
Yeah, he spent his entire life rejecting offers for like promotions within the church and different roles within the archdiocese and the country and money and all. And he just spent his entire life rejecting all these material things to serve the poor and defend them. As you say, where they didn't have anyone that was willing to defend them. Which is this how he thinks about Foggy? Maybe? Like, is this about him or is this about Foggy? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't think about that. Yeah, I mean, I probably Foggy. It would be very strange if it was talking about himself. It must be about Foggy. Because in the
Yeah.
previous episode with the Punisher, he talks all about like we could work a lifetime and never measure up to his decency kind of thing. Like, and I think
Right.
it's easy to forget that it isn't just Matt who goes out of his way to like to help out people who otherwise can't get any help. Like, as much as like Foggy joked about like, oh, he wants to be rich from lawyering, like he always went along with Matt's plans to help out the little guy kind of thing.
Yeah, it's the shtick of Foggy being like, oh, like, what if we were rich? It's like, no, like he wanted to do, like, Foggy is the reason why they left that firm and they went out on their own and they did what they did. And you think about Foggy and the difficulty that caused for him and his family, right? Like he sort of has that rift between him and his brother and him and his father that's sort of caused by him going and doing this altruistic thing with the law, and then when he is successful, all they can do is sort of go like, well, when are you marrying Marcy? Like, when are you having kids? Like, what do you like? When are you coming back to the shop? Like, nothing he could sort of do in his life was good enough for his family, and yet here he is, constantly sacrificing and doing the right thing. Yeah, Matt, I suppose, is trying to honor that memory in some way. And yes, we get, as he's saying the prayer, we get what Darth wanted, which is flashbacks to the death and this kind of, this impression of trauma. And this opening scene is very odd. So it's two things happening concurrently, and we're sort of cutting between them as they escalate. Heather and Matt. So Heather is telling Matt about her new book. They're having this conversation. She's sort of saying, she catches him praying, and she's like, "Oh, you still do that?" And he's like, "It's kind of a habit or whatever." Which again probably suggests that he isn't Catholic anymore, but there's still this part of him that he still maybe reads this liturgy for Foggy or something like that. And she's telling him about the book she's writing, which is a book about vigilantes and what the concept of a mask offers, whether it offers us permission, whether it helps us be our true selves. And then she sort of starts to drill him a little bit about like, well, like, you've worked with vigilantes, right? And he's like, yeah. She's like, well, like, like, could you like hook me up? Like, and she's like, well, what about Frank Castle? And he's like, you want to interview the Punisher? She's like, bad idea. He's like, no. Like, I mean, and then she says, oh, like, well, what about Daredevil? You work with him, right? And just the tone is very strange. And we're sort of jump cutting between this and Fisk being told about the murals, and that it's human blood. It's a very strange opening.
Is that it is strange? Like the way it's edited, clearly, it seems like it was, when it was filmed, it was not meant to be like cut. It was not meant to be cutting between two scenes.
Yes.
But is that what it cuts between? But with, because in my notes, I make it seem like it was cutting between this Heather and Matt and Luca visiting Fisk.
Oh, that's probably, yeah, you're right. Yes, that might be
because it fits. Yeah, it fits more with the theme of this conversation about like, because Heather is basically saying like, oh, unless we have a mask on, we can't be our true selves and do what we really want to do. And Luca visiting Fisk, it's very clear that Fisk wants to bash his head in, but he can't. He's the mayor and he's in his office kind of thing, and
yes.
He's suppressing his desire. Yeah, you
are correct. I read my note wrong. It's a quick cut between Fisk dealing with Luca and this conversation with Heather. The Luca thing is interesting because Fisk, like, he threatens him and then he's like, oh, it's an extra $1 million to whatever. And Luca just doesn't take him seriously at all. He's just kind of like, oh, like, nice of you to think so, but like, that's fine. My note here does say, I think these two episodes have a problem with the editing more than anything. Because I don't know why they made this choice to cut between it. again, this is the type of thing the old show just wouldn't have done. It would have been like, no, you sit in this scene and then you follow that character from this scene for a moment of silence so that you and them reflect on what it is, and then you go to the other conversation, and then we do that. Like, there's a impatience this episode has to get to the action, which I really
And
felt.
there's such an awkwardness in that scene with Heather and Matt too. Like, I feel like that's quite a strong. It would elicit quite a strong emotion if it just did, if it let you sit in that scene. But yeah, as you say, I think there's an impatience with this show, and I feel like that's a lack of like clear direction that I feel like is connected to the reshoots and all that.
You also have to wonder how much of that is coming from like focus testing and people saying, the show is too slow. If one of the biggest criticisms of the initial sort of go through was like there's too much lawyering, it's too procedural, there's not enough action. It feels like they might have overcorrected, and they're like, well, if that's the case, then we need to have everything rush toward action. And yeah, it's a weird opening.
I'm also curious about who they were focus testing, because it seems like it's such a divergence from the original show, and it's like they were polling an entire different type of audience.
And then it feels like what they've done is they've Frankensteined the old stuff into the new show, and then it's kind of neither things now.
Yeah. I guess that makes a little bit of sense from Disney's perspective. Like, it is a soft reboot. You're wondering how will this play with audiences who've never seen Daredevil. We want to bring those people in stuff. So I understand, but like, yeah, it's just the result is a Frankenstein a bit.
I guess it's tricky for us, like for you and me, Pat, in some ways, because someone joked about this yesterday, and I was like, oh no, that's actually true. Which is like, we're probably two people that have we probably talked and studied that first show more than anyone on the internet. And probably any one of those writers' rooms, right? Like, just to be honest with you, we've thought about this show more than most people have. And I think a concern I had initially going into this style of coverage for this show is that we didn't have the benefit of being able to sit and have this story and these maneuvers, in the back of our heads for like 4 or 5 years, or 8 years, or whatever from when the show came out to when we started that. This feels like there was a period of time where someone thought really deeply about what the show was going to be, and then they brought in Scarter Payne to kind of fix the ship, and he's come in and he's done his best with what's there. But like, okay, this like mural with blood or whatever is such a compelling, like, just conceptually is such a compelling idea. Like, it's disturbing, but the disturbing nature of it is never dwelled on. No one is like you're supposed to be like, that's shocking, but no one is like, that's like, you don't get to see people be disturbed by it. You're just told like it's blood and you should be shocked by that, and it's shocking, and it is scary when he's draining Angela's blood, and this show doesn't pull its punch there. It's there's no other show on TV that would be allowed to drain a child's blood on television. It's a real like Daredevil, like that feels like a dub for the old style of show where but again, they did that in the old show, right? They were draining children's blood for the thing that brought Elektra back to life. It's like, so many of these things are shocking, yes, but they're not allowed to be disturbing in the same way that they were in the previous iteration. And I think that is just to what you were saying, Pat. It's what's the audience they're courting? Well, they don't want to freak everybody out. They don't want to have those episodes where you just sit in a dark room and you have like a disturbing argument with someone that you've half punched to death. Like, it just doesn't want to be that type of show in some ways. But then it wants the other parts of it. Like it once it's caked, and it wants to have the cake, but then not have the icing, but then insist that, but you remember the icing, right? It's like, yeah, but icing's the best part of the cake, dude. Like, what are we talking about? This is the one thing you're never supposed to do in media criticism, which is food analogies. Yeah. Next big thing I have, yes, awkward opening. I like the energy between Heather and Matt here. that it is that awkward. I was saying last time that I like this relationship on screen, and I think part of that is because they're allowed to have these moments of real relationships where it's just like sometimes the vibe is just not right in a conversation you're having with somebody, and it doesn't, those moments don't end the relationship. Them working through them deepen the relationship. You know, like the show is willing to let that stuff happen and let these characters be at times uncomfortable with each other, or at times be uncomfortable to experience in ways that feel very realistic to me. This conversation in the kitchen is the most like, you get into the back of your friend's car and they've clearly just been having an argument, and then they try and rope you into that argument, and like you're just like the vibe is off. This is that type of scene, and it's just a real shame that they cut between that and the Fisk scene, as you said, Pat. It's giving George Lucas style, like refusing to stick on one scene and needing everything to be chopped up and moving between different scenes for the aesthetic purpose of parallelism, instead of actually building a theme or letting a scene like happen. It's a very similar type of vibe to me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Weird.
I was going to say that I think that's just like the current filmmaking style, where you can only remain on one scene for like 30 seconds and then you have to cut to another scene because the audience is bored, or
Right.
at least that's the mindset, right? One thought I had about their relationship and the way that they're interacting there is, I wonder how common it is for one of the characters in a relationship to be a therapist and to understand what both parties are feeling in the moment, and to already have this encyclopedia of knowledge of what both parties should say to help the relationship move forward and get past these roadblocks. And then weigh the fact that it's the woman who has this knowledge and not the man, and what does that mean for the whole thing? And did the writers think about all of this when they were crafting that scene?
So,
And all the other ones where they argue.
So I drilled my friend Lucy about this. I asked her about this last night because she's my therapist friend, and I brought up the fact that this came up on the podcast, and I was like, so what, like, in your marriage, like, does you being a therapist mean that, like, you're able to have those conversations quicker or easier, or that you're able to overcome those things? She's like, fuck no, dude. Like, just because I know the language, that doesn't necessarily mean that, like, it's much easier for us to resolve an issue that we're having, or that I can say the right thing, because like you can't do therapy to, she's like, I can identify. So the example she's like, you know, we were talking about me, and she goes, I can help, like, I can identify and like see destructive behaviors that you do, and you and I both know why you're doing them. But me being a therapist doesn't then help you solve that, because I'm not in, like, I don't do therapy to you. It's like a skill that you like engage with, and it's not something that you can practice at home because you're too close to it. You can offer the language, and you get that at the start of the next episode where Heather gives the words for what Matt is experiencing, and certainly that is part of it. But the way that she explained it was like, it's less beneficial than you'd imagine. It gives you all the labels and the categories for everything, but it doesn't it does produce an asymmetry in the relationship. But in some ways, that's part of what makes those relationships work, because that other person can surprise you and move outside of those categories and do things that you're not expecting. And that's part of what makes it work. Because in a therapy context, you're having a conversation, but you're hyper-focused on this person in this moment. And like for that hour, that's like your entire world. But in a relationship, that's obviously not the case. There's lots of different things that are happening, and there's your feelings to consider as well, and what you want and what you feel, and that's just not something that is part of therapy. So that asymmetry, while it exists in the relationship at an aesthetic level, the way that she described it is practically it's the same type of asymmetry in every relationship. It's just you happen to have better labels and better names for things, and access to more drugs, you know. Yes, so I did ask that, and that was the explanation I got. Yeah. Which a lot of characters be talking about therapy this episode, you know? because so Angela goes to Matt's office, and this is like a direct follow on. And this kid has one mode, and it's working. Like, you know how like some actors, they can do one thing really well. This this young person has this one mode they can do, which is like, it's like unctuous guilt tripping outrage, but justified unctuous guilt tripping outrage. You know, and she goes up to Matt, and she's telling him that Hector was onto something. He was investigating something.
I don't know for sure, but I think it had something to do with all those people going missing, all those kidnappings. He started tracking them.
And Matt's like, oh, you know, like, it's not safe or whatever, like, and then, you know, she's like, don't pull that therapy
Don't pull that therapy talk that I'm processing or trying to control or whatever. Or that I should be in school, because that's what Hector would have wanted. This is what he would have wanted. Someone finishing his work. Someone actually doing something for once.
Therapy talk. Was I doing that?
Straight up. And I hate that shit.
Sure. Kinda hate it too.
All those kidnappings were all close to the old queue line. The one they shut down. Track 61.
Look, Angela, I'm just a lawyer, all right? I tried to help your uncle in court, but something like this, that's for the police.
The police killed my uncle. I'm not going to them.
All right, fair enough. But what do you want me to do about it?
How about literally anything? Mr. Murdoch, attorney at law, big fancy office, here to help the little guy, right? But only on your terms. Because when the little guy puts something for real in your hands, you're all, no.
I was like, bro, damn, like, it's, whew. And something
But
like,
in this case, the literally anything is, please solve a serial killer murder case for me. Which is, I understand, like, I would also be like, what the fuck do you want me to do about this? But, you know, I understand that she is a kid asking an adult, like, hey, no one else is doing anything about this.
yeah, an adult who seems to be in a position where this is the type of thing that he can do something about.
Yeah.
What I like too is that it seems like maybe parts of Heather, and this happens in any relationship, whether like romantic or otherwise, if you're like an empathetic person, which is you kind of like absorb constituent parts of the people around you, right? And Matt has sort of absorbed some of Heather and some of the way that she talks to people who are upset, right? Because that's so Angela, you know, she's like, well, don't like therapy talk at me, dude. She's like, I hate that shit. And Matt's like, yeah, kind of hate it too. Which is like, that's like kind of a, it's hard to distinguish between where this show is being really obvious and where it finds nuance. But that to me is like a moment of like nuance where I believe that about Matt. But I also think that like, yes, he's kidding, but also a little part of him does maybe chafe a bit to what Darth was saying before, maybe chafes against the fact that Heather is a therapist and it provides him less avenues to sort of do his classic Matt Murdock thing, which is like do a little dry joke to get out of a serious conversation, right? You see him do that all the time to Foggy throughout their relationship. It does maybe close off some avenues for him of ways he's able to avoid the truth or avoid dealing with things. And so he like kind of hates it, but he knows it's probably good for him. It's kind of my read on that. The detail she gives is all those kidnappings were close to the old queue line, the one they shut down, track 61. So she puts the screws to him and asks him to do literally anything about what she's found. Then, again, weird cutting between different scenes. We have a very oddly chopped up sort of sequence in the mayor's office. Do you guys have anything on Angela, or should we talk about some of these big plot points before the action?
Yeah, I didn't have much on Angela.
I'm blanking on her name, but his coworker, the lady that he always he always avoids her and doesn't explain anything to her, even when half of it is like it's not really a secret. And progressively throughout the show, I'm like, he is just treating her terribly. And she cares about him and she constantly tries to communicate that, and there's nothing reciprocal there. And yeah,
I mean, I think normally there is, but I think it's to what Heather says at the start of the next episode, right? Which is like he is just all of his trauma that he has been repressing is completely taking over him. Like he is spiraling, and shutting down from
the
everyone
trauma
around
from
him.
Foggy. Yeah.
Shut up. So we get some details here that I'll breeze us through, so we can talk about the fun stuff. Gallo's there and he's cut his hair. The show does this sometimes where it's like trying to communicate time passing. So yeah, we learn that this serial killer Muse mixes blood into the paint and then applies the epoxy on top. It makes the murals essentially impervious. They reveal that he's killed something odd like 60 people. This is a lot of people. And during this explanation, Fisk kind of shuts it all out and he starts laughing. And it sort of rises out of him and he sort of clicks into mob boss mode, and seems to have a plan here. And we don't really know what that plan looks like, but we know it's probably bad. And Muse is a scary looking dude up close. We get, he's out spray painting and these girls come up to him and they're like, oh, like your work, da da da. And then like he turns around and it's like, oh shit. Like this is not good. And he of course murders them because, he's a serial killer. And
he's evil Banksy.
He's evil Banksy, dude. Now, some would say graffiti, Banksy does vandalism. I think it's art. And Muse's murals are good. I'm not sure that they're good enough that you'd be like, let me get a pick. I don't know. I've seen better graffiti. Is all I'm saying.
You know what I think would have been a really interesting decision is if he didn't kill the two girls and instead he like painted them an autograph or something.
He poses for a
because
selfie.
they were like fans. They're fans. They're gushing over his work and like he's an artist, right?
It's his true self, Darth. You know what I mean? That is actually a really good point. It is weird that he kills them. It does feel like maybe, yeah. But then I guess he's so unstable at this point that like it's just the what's that thing? Which is like once you unplug the bath and the water starts spiraling, it's really hard to put the plug back in. Like I feel like he's in that moment.
I'm trying to remember what he says later to Heather, because it's something about like he knows who he is now because the world knows who he is now. And so like these girls seeing him and being excited and calling him Muse, like all of that should have fed into the ego that we see displayed later in Heather's office.
Yeah, I agree.
But they probably they were like, we needed to have a murder scene. He's a murderer,
But this is part of the narrative, right?
I feel like if this was the original Netflix show, longer form, it would have been an entire episode where it starts out with this and then he goes, yeah, sure, and he invites them back to his lair or something, whatever. And it's like a tense like thriller episode where these girls slowly realize that they're in over their heads and they need to get out, and yeah.
I think it would be sort of the being like that kind of. I don't know if you guys know this, but I've been in a big Michael Mann kick lately. I watched Manhunter the other week, and that's obviously based on the Silence of the Lambs books. And there's a really good scene where the serial killer, it's like an extended 20-minute sequence where he meets this woman at work and she's blind, so she can't see his like deformities or whatever. And they go back to his place and they have sex, and like she really likes him. And it's just the back half of that film is this slow spiral of her realizing that she's made a mistake. This kind of feels like it could have been that sort of thing where, maybe this is, he invites him back to his lair, things start to go bad, and then, it escalates into murder rather than just, he's serial killer, so he's out here, here I go killing again. You know what I mean? Like, it... Yeah.
And then that episode would be like you'd get all the information in that episode of what he was talking about with Heather in the the therapy room, but like much longer and much more nuanced and stuff, I reckon.
maybe gilded and fictionalized a little bit, right? Like sort of this is you might get like the version of his story that he would tell to impress somebody, or like it's like how Stephen King always prints the myth rather than the reality. Whenever King talks about certain parts of his life, he talks about the parts of his life the way that they're remembered by the public and the way they're mythologized, not how they actually happened. You could imagine him doing that, and then you get the therapy scene where Heather sees through it and she gets him to admit the truth, and then you have that point of comparison. You can see the distance between the reality and then the delusion, right?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, because we get that a little bit with of course with Dex in that third season, where you get the sort of illusion of the delusion with reality when when he bumps into the girl Julie in the hotel, and it goes from like his fiction is so paper thin that all it takes is him saying two things wrong too close together, and she starts to put together that he's been stalking her. And you could imagine a similar sort of maneuver here, if they had spent the time with him. Yeah.
And I feel like that would embellish this theme about Heather's book a lot more, that we're a different person when we have the mask on kind of thing. And yeah, that would make sense. Whereas I feel like, and here, like, what did that even amount to? That Heather's book on vigilantes, like, kind of nothing, right? Like, or at least so far.
Can I guess? I think it's gonna be a way to get Frank back in the picture for like a big finale showdown fight with Fisk's goons and Fisk or something. Like,
oh, I reckon that's probably accurate. Yeah. He's gonna go face off against the hit squad that Fisk has.
Yeah.
We haven't seen anything to indicate she's actually writing it though, right? Like she just tells him that I'm starting, or my next book will be this. So she might just be in the research phase at this point.
Well, it sounds like it because she's asking for interviews with people.
Yeah, but also, like, if that's the case, like, I also thought that, but then later on I was like, well, her already published work must also be about masks and stuff, because otherwise why would Muse be so obsessed with her? Or like, it must be something to do with like hiding your true identity or something.
Yeah, I don't think it focused on masks so much as like letting your inner self out or something like that.
Yeah.
It was about fear, because I remember I did the bit about the man without fear, right? That was the bit that I did.
Oh, right.
See if I can find it. I've Control F fear in my notes, and there's a lot of fear in the show notes.
Yeah, in that scene where she's doing the book signing though, but she also talks about, like, she also has a bit about masks.
Yes. The book that she wrote is called Live Without Fear, and obviously Daredevil is the man without fear. And she's talking about, how to be vulnerable, how to be your true self, and how to, all of these masks and fictions that we produce, that we use to avoid, that are driven by fear, sort of thing. So it's clearly related. She's clearly a social psychologist, right? Is I guess what I'm saying, rather than like cognitive or behavioral or anything like that, which makes sense. Yeah.
I don't know why this comparison popped up in my brain, but I just started thinking about Arrested Development and Tobias writing The Man Inside Me.
That's good stuff. That's funny. Okay, I want to talk about the disastrous Fisk fund driving. I went to say like fundraising, and the word driving got in the way somehow. I don't know how that happened. But he is he's trying to drum up money for his revitalization of the Red Hook textile and port, and he sort of has to glad hand with the wealthy of New York. And yeah, he sort of gives Vanessa his pitch of what politics is, where he says, you find what a person wants, and then you either withhold it or provide it, and they'll do anything. And she's like, no, you don't understand. It's all about ego and vanity, and you asking for money and groveling is the point. Like, this is what they want. They want to have power and they want to feel superior. And we get a series of exchanges that are all complete disasters where everyone in this room knows that Fisk is like they see straight through him in a lot of ways. And I think you're right, Pat. This is where it really comes into focus for me that Fisk views this fiction that they all have about him as part of his like grand plan, where he's like, well, they won't see me doing all these other things because they'll see me for just the petty crook or whatever, and I'll outsmart them in the end. Yeah. This, I guess, two things that are worth saying in this scene. There's this one conversation with this one woman where she goes pretty hard toward the end of the conversation, where he's sort of talking around her, and she says, I'm saying your port expansion project is a self-serving con, Mr. Mayor. You're using taxpayer dollars to further enrich yourself. Like, he just gets dragged by everybody, and he has to, like, smile through it. Now,
I feel like yes, he in Fisk's head, all these interactions and like the the motivations of these people and like what they think of Fisk is, I think he thinks they're underestimating him when this is all like one cog in his plan kind of thing. But I also think this is like genuinely like a learning experience for Fisk, and like he's genuinely like coming up against what he doesn't know, and I feel like that's symbolized by his jacket ripping when he's like putting it on, and he's like, oh, my suits don't fit like they used to. Like he's genuinely learning that the world of legitimate power works very differently than the world of criminal power.
yeah.
And I feel like is it the end of this episode where like Luca comes in and tries to kill Fisk and he gets shot by the new Wesley, and I feel like that's the symbolic of Fisk like marrying or like growing to learn how to marry the criminal and legitimate worlds of power.
That's the end of the next episode, but yes, I think you're right.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think he just is completely unprepared for this.
Yeah.
And they just step all over him, and they're right. The worst part about it is like he just doesn't have any rhetorical maneuvers here. He doesn't have any like argument here because they just see right through him. Yeah, and I think your mileage is going to vary on how much you think that this is sort of part of the plan, or if he's going to spin this to be part of the plan, or whether he does get outclassed here. Now, did y'all hit the cameo alert on this scene? Did y'all get this one?
Oh yeah, loved him.
Kate Bishop's stepdad.
Yeah,
the greatest character in that season of TV. He's so good.
Yeah, he was really good at just like so obviously like evil looking, gives off such evil vibes, and it just turns out to be this like just eccentric weird guy who likes swords.
He likes swords so much. This motherfucker like has like 27 katanas in his home. Like
there is nothing weird about that.
Darth's like, that's normal, right, guys? Right? Yeah, he keys into something that's interesting. My note says cameo alert - Avengers alert. But the other thing that I think is curious is he basically tells Fisk, like, this predatory thing you're doing with vigilantes, it's not gonna work. Fisk is like, is that a threat? And he's like, no, it's a warning. Like, you don't seem to understand. Like, this is a bad idea. Which you can obviously feel that pressure coming from. He can't say, my daughter is Hawkeye. But it sort of has the same rhetorical weight as someone going, no, like you think you know what you've bitten off, but you don't know what you've bitten off. Like, you think that you understand you can chew this meal. I'm telling you that you can't. And that seems to be the tone of all of these conversations, to an extent. Whether they're, how vicious they are seems to vary based on the person. But yeah.
Well, I feel like he says, "Is that a threat?" And he goes, "No, it's a warning." Like, he is genuinely just like pointing out that you don't know how this office works, how this legitimate power works. You are beholden to the rich people, and I'm telling you, the rich people, this war on vigilantes is not in their interest, kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He ends up sort of backing out early, but yeah, Darth, what do you make of this disastrous little party? Did this do anything for you, or were you like, yep, moving along?
No, I adored it. What's the word? Schadenfreude, taking pleasure in someone else's sorrow.
Yeah.
So like seeing Fisk fail, I was just like, ooh,
The
I like
catharsis.
this. I like it. And
Yeah.
the only thing, like y'all were saying earlier, is we don't really know if this is all like part of his like grand plan, but he doesn't come off like it. There's never this, like sneaking, conniving look after someone walks away or anything. Like, it looks like he's losing control, and that's very much the Fisk that's, I guess, maybe most interesting. I mean, he was super interesting when he like had a plan and you didn't know what the plan was, but you knew that he had a plan, and now it's like he doesn't have a plan at all, and somehow that's even more interesting to me because you still know he's gonna like come out on top, but you can't figure out how.
Yeah,
I'm reminded of that scene a couple episodes earlier when he's at the dock and he goes, how do we get this project started? And he's all excited, and then he has no idea like the steps to actually get that going. And like, I just, I feel like, again, in this scene, like, he just doesn't realize what the office of mayor is. He doesn't realize that he's not actually at the top, and it's like it's a bit of whiplash for him.
Yeah, and that, I think, is a real challenge for him, because like he's the kingpin, right? Like, he's the guy that he built this entire empire around him, and he was just in charge, and there was never any question. And if he wanted to do something, he'd just say, how do I do it? And then Wesley would give him the steps, and then it would get done. Like, and here he is with none of those levers of control anymore. Yeah, just kind of completely out of his depth. Yeah, and then, every time he looks down, it seems like the ground is shrinking beneath his feet. He's running out of less and less places where he can stand before this all just goes wrong. We know that the head of the police has issued his threat, which is like, I want you to have the shortest stint in this chair ever. No one likes him as the mayor, right? And that's a difficult thing, I think, that he's now having to actually deal with. Yeah. We get the cherry thing, which we said in the summary, which I don't want to dote on too much, where he just basically passes on the information. Matt sort of starts to spiral. And then, unfortunately, how do I say this? No relation to the contemporary moment, Fisk puts together a task force of corrupt secret police, basically the gang of Punisher cosplayers, and he gives them, I mean, it couldn't be more on the nose. This is basically the Italian secret police under Mussolini, and we sort of get, he tells them that he's brought them in because of their creative thinking, when they, I want your creative thinking when you pursue this guy, and he calls them, now,
Motivated individuals.
And the thing I like, so he's like, we're raising them to stop Muse, and he calls them the Anti-Vigilante Task Force. It's like, dude, those are not the same thing. Like, he's just used the excuse, right? He's used the excuse to make a secret police. And this is how it begins. This is how it starts, right? Is you find the in, and then once you have the momentum, it never stops, and it'll never stop until you stop this guy. And he gives them like military grade hardware. They have no body cams on, and he basically just says, do whatever you need to do. You have access to all of the resources. Like, no one's going to get in your way. Go and stop this Muse guy. And so while this is happening, concurrently, we have Angela going to investigate Muse. But But yeah,
Like, I like in the next episode, he calls them the dark thin line. Like, even he knows that. Even he
buddy.
knows what he's saying is bullshit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I feel two types of ways about this. I think it's good and legible to put this on television. Like, I think especially in this current moment, it is useful to have simple visualizations of how these things start and what these things look like, and the hallmarks of what fascism looks like. I think is like a helpful thing to do right now. This seems a little on the nose to me, even for Fisk. Like, I think it's the line anti-vigilante task force that I had a bit of static with, where I was like, you guys kind of put too fine a point on it. I feel like his speech to rile them up did enough for me where I didn't need him to say the contradictory thing for me to understand the contradiction. But that's just, my personal taste. I don't know, how did you feel about this, Darth?
I think the purpose is directly letting them know that you are not here just for the average citizen. You are here because I need someone of greater strength to go after these heroes who are not heroes. And if he doesn't overtly say that, then they don't necessarily know that they are supposed to be hunting Daredevil, right?
Yep. I mean, that makes sense. Yeah. Like, it makes logical sense. I think it's just too clicky for me, if that makes sense.
It's on the nose, but we idiots need to be told to our faces. We gotta have eye contact.
Yeah. You hold up the sign that says sarcasm.
Yep.
Yes. So I assume this will be our big sort of this will be our big crescendo of the season, is my assumption. Powell seems to be the 2IC of North. North is the guy in charge of the task force, and it seems like Powell is sort of the number 2, which is cool. I mean, like, Powell is a piece of shit, and we've been dealing with him being a piece of shit this entire season. Makes sense for him to be a primary antagonist. North seemed familiar, and I couldn't find any evidence that he was in previous Daredevil, but he seems familiar for some reason. It might just be the actor is in something, but yeah, he's sort of a new character.
Did you check Punisher?
I did not.
There you go.
Patrick. Interesting.
But I reckon he's a new character.
Yeah, probably. It's just, he's like a really familiar actor, and I was like, maybe he's in like a Transformers film or something like that. Like, he just seemed really, you know what I mean? He seems like that type of guy.
High quality franchise you jumped to there.
Listen, I think that some of those films are perfectly fine. And I don't like this anti-Transformers rhetoric. I think there's a lot of interesting theory to be done looking at Michael Bay's oeuvre. Yeah, I think that they are interesting films to study. Are they good to watch? No. No. No, they're bad to watch. Is that first one pretty fine? No. Yeah, the 5th one is fine. Whichever is the one with the Excalibur, that one's fine. And Merlin, that one's alright.
I think you're working backwards from Bumblebee.
Probably, yeah.
You've convinced yourself. You watched Haley Steinfeld and you went, oh, you know what? Transformers isn't that bad, actually.
Yeah, these cars are kind of charming. Yes. Okay, so Angela gets caught. It's bad news. Man, Muse's lair is scary. This is a scary guy. This is a rare moment of, like, the show really evoking. This isn't like, okay, corrupt cops are terrifying. The system is terrifying, right? This is, like, visceral and scary in a way that, like, we haven't yet seen in this show fully. And the fact that they linger on it, and Muse actually starts draining her blood, and you watch the needle go in, and it made my skin crawl. And this is I don't know what the argument was in the revision of the editing bay with the Disney exec and how Scarter Payne got this across the line, but I'm really glad that he did, because this is a really crucial moment of communicating. Yeah, this is like, this isn't every other TV show where just before the needle goes in, Matt shows up and knocks him away and he says, "Get away from her." This isn't that show. This is like, there are real consequences to this shit. This is going to have material consequence for this character, some kind of lasting impact. Yeah, it's scary. This happens. So there's these two concurrent scenes that we set up in the summary, right? There's Matt going to save Angela as Daredevil, and then there's Fisk sort of going down into his lair with the axe to confront Adam, and this is to the thing we talked about earlier with the narrowing. This is really where I felt some of that narrowing with what Fisk delivers to Adam. Did you guys have this little snippet of a monologue that he gives?
No, I don't have it, but I remember it. It's just about David and Goliath. I find that a simple tool is a great equalizer.
Yeah, exactly. But it's that same thing as like, he's like, when I was younger, smaller. It's like, why is every monologue from Fisk in this show just like, well, when I was a boy? Like, there's more to him than that. And I understand how often, like, this is something I'm not in love with, right? They go back to this well of like, when I was a boy, and it can have a tendency to make it feel like this is Fisk's only rhetorical maneuver, where they look at this inciting incident of him killing his father and looking at the moment the Kingpin was born and being obsessed by that. But it makes him feel a little bit thin as a character in some, like it sands off some of the interest that is Fisk. Like, there are other ways to have him deliver this monologue that would involve him reflecting on his past with, like, the crime families or something that's happened in the intervening years. Like, there are ways that you could have this build his character instead of rely on the same characterization this show has been relying on all the while. I just think it's a missed trick in some ways.
Does he actually say when I was a boy in this scene? Because doesn't he just talk about how when he was younger he was fighting bigger people? And this is where my brain went. But you know, in the original series, he talks about, you know, like supposedly after he became like an adult, he talks about he traveled around Asia, and like that's where he learned a lot of his skills for, you know, violence and politicking and business and all that. So that's I thought when he was talking about when I was younger and smaller, I thought this was when he was talking about like fighting men 3 times his size. I'm just imagining him fighting, I don't know, like a huge Mongolian dude, you know, and young 18-year-old Fisk just has like a sling or something. That's what I was picturing.
That is a much better reading than what I had. That is like way more evocative, and I'm gonna make that my headcanon now. That's way cooler.
Yeah.
I remember there was a scene where like young Fisk had a bloody nose and his dad's like, "Oh, what happened?" And then they go and they beat up the bully together. So assumedly that happened a lot, assumedly, and that's what Fisk is referring back to. What I did think would be an interesting reading is if it was the opposite of what David had just said, and every time that Fisk references when I was young, he's actually referencing before he became Kingpin and not after, because part of him is still yearning for that lost innocence.
Those are both way better than what my brain did. It's my reading sucks of this scene. That's way more interesting. But I think you're probably more onto it there, Darth, because his dad uses a baseball bat to beat up that other kid. So that sort of tracks logically. Yeah, I would have just liked a little bit more flavor, and just I wanted this to be more evocative than it was for me in the moment. And maybe I was just in my own head about it. That's also entirely possible. So he basically throws down the axe. So okay, is this Fisk's version of like, I'm not gonna shoot you without a gun in your hand?
Yeah. I think it's like there's like a twisted like growth. He's like, oh, so See, I'm giving him a fair fight. Like this is an honorable thing to do. This is the new me.
You could also potentially read it as like he wanted an excuse to actually kill Adam.
Well, I think
like
that's...
he had promised her he wouldn't, but if Adam swings an axe at him, then he quote unquote had to.
Well, I think that's true. I think it's both. I think it's a both and scenario where I think that's true. That's the real reason he's doing it, but the way he's justifying it to himself is what Pat said, which is like, well, I'm a changed man. Like I'm giving him this is the only way that he sees that Adam could get out is if he kills Fisk, because Fisk can't let him go. And that's why at the end he's bathed in like the light of God, because in his mind this was like a moment of like growth and he did the right thing. Because he knows he can't keep Adam in the basement, but he knows he can't let Adam go. So this new Fisk finds his compromise of like, well, if he beats me, then he can go and like that's fine. But like that, you know, I think it is that. But I think at the true heart and the core of it, it's like he just really wanted to kill Adam. Like that's the truth behind the justification. It's the lie, you know.
Fisk is like, you know, if I was in his position, I would win. You know, like I've done this before and I've come out on top, so therefore it's fair.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He brutalizes the shit out of this dude. We've seen
slaps the shit out of him.
It like this is no contest. In contrast to Daredevil and Muse. I'm gonna go to Darth in a second to talk about the Muse fight, but I want to stick with the Fisk fight first because that's the one that I can understand and have things to say about, and then we'll go to Fisk. We'll go to Fisk. We'll go to Darth for the sort of moment with Daredevil and Muse. But yeah, Fisk, there's this really cool moment, and this is where the show's match cutting and its like insistence on cutting between scenes does work for me, because there's this one moment where Daredevil does like a judo throw and Fisk does the same judo throw, and it's a bit on the nose, but I think it really works because it communicates the similarities between what they're experiencing in this moment, where they're both just completely collapsing and colliding with their old selves. And the difference is Matt is honest with himself about it, where he's like, fuck it. Like I'm just going to send it, dude. I'm just going to send it. And Fisk is convincing himself that he's changed. This is like what Pat was saying. This is new, or this is growth. Not realizing he has just completely collapsed into his previous self. I think Matt has a level of acceptance here that Fisk doesn't. But yeah, Fisk beats the shit out of this dude. At one point, you know, he does a judo throw to toss him onto the table, and he just starts punching Adam's skull until he dies. And it's like, it's rough.
I like how he lifts him up to slam him onto the table, but he lifts him so high that he slams him onto the ceiling first, and it's like the ceiling kind of explodes, and then he goes onto the table.
It's wild. He beats him to death with his bare hands, and then he like drags him into the cell, and yeah, he just sits in the light as the music swells. Yeah, it's boy howdy. And that is intercut with the Matt Muse fight. I don't know, Pat, what is this fight? How did it find you? What was it like seeing Daredevil back at it again in the red armor?
This fight, there are good and bad moments. I feel like the choreography and the flips are on point. There's one point where he throws his baton and it bounces like 3 times before it hits Muse and it comes back to him like Cap's shield. But then there are other things like how he had so much time to pull out the syringe and he just like stares at it and lets Muse like get back up and stumble back up, and like he's like, oh no, I was right, I was just about to do it and Muse jumped on me. It's like, yeah, there's some stuff like that, but overall it was all right.
Yeah. All right, Darth, this is your moment. Load the chamber up. What did you think?
Ironically, I had the opposite impression of what you did, where I think that Fisk was not like Fisk was happy in that moment, and Matt is sad in this moment. If quite the right way to put it, but at one point, like, Matt actually like screams out in anger, and I took that as like I didn't want to be doing this again. Whether or not that's the case, but the way that scream happens, like he's not actively fighting. He like throws Muse against the wall, looks up at the ceiling and screams out, and then goes back to punching him. It's very uncharacteristic of fights that we've seen him in before, and immediately I was like, he doesn't want to be doing this. He feels like he's forced to be doing this, whereas Fisk is happily beating this guy to death with a smile on his face, right?
I agree with that. Yeah, I was saying that he's more like he's resigned to this course in some ways. That's why he says fuck it. He's like I have, like, I'm gonna do this. I have to do this. He's not.
It's like
pleased.
He's not deluded about his nature, kind of thing. Whereas Fisk is.
Yes.
Yeah. Same with same as Pat said. There were several things about the choreography that didn't quite hit. Ironically, the flips are one thing that I always like. They look cool, but it's so impractical. But real cool. It's fine.
You're just jealous.
Yeah, the same
you can't
thing
do
with
a
like
flip. That's all it is. I understand.
Yeah, yeah, and that's it. Several moments where like the syringe thing, like Pat said, where like Matt just pauses for no reason just because the choreography was bad, and that lets Muse get up and get another hit on him, blindsiding him. And at the time I was like, they have to do this stupid choreography to keep the fight interesting because this guy is not a super soldier and that's the only one who could take on Matt. Fast forward and he's a Taekwondo champion. So go back and watch this fight, you could see a little bit of that here, and whether or not more of it doesn't come out because Muse was just like surprised and taken off guard. Because I feel like the second fight that they have is a little more even than this one is, but I haven't really compared the two of them, I guess. I really liked it. Even though, like we had talked about earlier, it still is not character driven like the previous fights were. It was very much he has to fight the guy to save the girl. And he doesn't know who this is. He has no emotional connection. In most of the previous seasons, he would have had some kind of connection to this person and, been yelling at them about something that they shouldn't have done or whatever,
Yeah, the closest I could find in my sort of internal mental Wikipedia of Daredevil is this is similar to the first fight Matt has with Nobu, where Matt goes to square up with Fisk and Nobu is there. And Matt doesn't know this guy at all, and this guy Nobu basically almost kills Matt, and Matt at the last second manages to set him on fire and kills him. And then obviously Nobu comes back to life, and they have a big relationship between those two. Well, they almost have a relationship between these two characters, and then the Defenders happens. But like, it's almost great. And that's a very similar moment where it's like you have the initial exchange that has no emotional weight, then you have the follow-up exchange which has emotional weight. The difference is that isn't 4 episodes later like it is in that first season, where you actually get to know Nobu as a guy and understand his place in the organization and his motivations. It's the next episode, and it's because it's Heather. It's aesthetically you're doing the same maneuver, but doesn't like it. It doesn't. The execution isn't the same. If that makes sense.
And you reminded me of that first fight scene with Nobu, and I got goosebumps. Man, that's such a good fight scene. It's the threat and like the desperation in that scene. Man, so good.
He's like gasping and like just it's like he's bleeding all over, and he does that like Nobu throws the knife thing, and Matt does like that flip at the last second and manages to hit the thing, and then he catches on fire, and it's like, oh my, like that. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
Also, another thing in this Disney Plus series is he's using his baton a lot more, which is cool. I think like it's it's adding to that campiness but yeah, like he got it in the original series. I feel like he didn't really use it that much, but like in this show, he's using it a lot. And I dig it.
I
Yeah,
hate it.
same.
I hate it. I've said this in season 3. I like Daredevil the boxer. I like it when he's forced to be in that mode of like, he sets himself and he's just he has to wail on dudes, and you get a bit of that next episode, a little bit of that next episode. But I much prefer that as a mode of this character fighting than I necessarily do the Billy Club. They do some interesting things with it next episode that made me go, oh, like actively gasp. But I much prefer. And I think I find it much more legible because I don't have a good eye for action. I find it much more legible when it's that kind of boxing, or it's that more slow paced physical stuff. Like, you see, obviously the hallway fight in both of those first 2 seasons. Those are the hallway fight in the 3rd season. I find those incredibly legible by comparison with, say, the Muse fight. I just don't have a good eye for what's going on, and so I find it challenging when it's like it gets thrown, then it does something, and I'm like, I don't know what the outcome of that was. I just struggle with it, so it's just not something I love. Yeah, that's a me taste thing. That's not a value judgment on its inclusion in the story.
I mean, yeah, I don't want him to use the baton forever, but yeah, I like it every now and again.
Some of that's a practical effects thing, though, because there were several times where he used it, and I just had to infer that it did XYZ, even though I couldn't really tell what it did. Like he threw it and it hit the wall and it stuck in the wall, and then he pulled something and then it knocked something somewhere, and I don't really know what happened, but and that's like I said, a fault of how they practically did that effect, whether it was a practical VFX or whether it was all CG. So that it could be that you don't actually hate that weapon. They just haven't really done a good job showing that weapon in a way that makes sense to your brain.
I mean, they don't in the original series either with the club. Like, they never find that to the point where, like, after season 2, he doesn't use the club. Like, in the Defenders, he just doesn't have it. But the corollary to that is in season 1. He has the sticks that Stick gives him. That sentence sucks. But he has the he has the 2 sticks. I don't know what are they called, Darth? The 2
Sticks.
Fuck off. What this is so you're getting a B- on your next performance review. What's the point of having you if you can't tell us the weapon name stuff? That's your whole personality.
You know what is a good use of the I guess it's not the Billy Club, it is once again the sticks, but in season 3 Dex uses those sticks greatly.
Oh, it's awesome.
How he like bounces them off the floor in the office fight. Oh, that was awesome.
Actually, he does, yeah. That's more stick based than it is the Billy Club, but it's in stick mode.
Yeah.
It's cool. And he throws them into people's throats and shit. It's so metal.
Yeah, it's it's so cool.
That season of television rules. Okay, so this episode ends with, we haven't said the thing yet, which is Matt low-key hangs Muse with the Billy Clubs. So he sort of wraps around, and he's literally hanging him to death, like choking him to death. And it's only when he hears that Angela stops breathing that he lets go, or at least that's sort of what's communicated through the scene. And as he's reviving Angela, Muse gets away, and we hear the kind of repetition of the St. Ives. It's sort of the liturgy again, and he manages to revive Angela. We get Fisk bathed in the light. Angela kind of starts breathing again, and she's like, Daredevil, and he says, "It's okay, I'm here." And then there's a pause, and then he goes, "Yeah, I'm here." Very deliberate delivery from Cox here. I think that there are a lot of actors that wouldn't be able to do that moment, right? Where it's that breath, and then you feel something in his posture change, and he goes, like, he's talking to himself. Like, he's like, "It's okay, I'm here." That's to Angela. And then to himself, he goes, "Yeah, I'm here." It's really great acting.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know enough about acting as like a craft, but like this guy fucking kills it. Yeah. And yes, the Muse got away and Daredevil's back. That's kind of how this episode wraps up. I only have one more thing on this before we go to break. Do you guys have anything in this episode that you wanna talk about?
I disliked how like Daredevil just like turns around and Muse is gone. Like I'm sure there's an amount of distraction that it takes to do the CPR, but he's got super hearing, and there was a dangerous criminal behind him, and so this is like the 5th time in the 5 minutes he's been in the room that he has turned his back on the criminal, and he could have been attacked again, just like he did multiple times while they were fighting. And it's also just the very stereotypical the bad guy just disappears, right? Which
I feel like they play it pretty fast and loose with that, with his hearing and hearing people approach. Like in the next episode, like he just lets Officer Powell come in and see him when he's investigating Muse's lair and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they tried to make a big deal of it requires him to concentrate for this thing to really work, but then at other times it doesn't. I don't know. There's a fast and loose is right.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. Yeah, consistency, a bit of a challenge. I think you've keyed into that a few times, Darth with his fighting prowess. And yeah, you can really feel some of the rewrites. And look, I want to be clear, like I don't think rewrites are a bad thing. Like they are, like rewrites are good. That is like how you get to a good story. It's just some of this stuff isn't quite clicking the way that I would like it to. Now, I want to preemptively respond to an argument that I've seen online, or how do I say this? I don't want to strawman this either. I just want to try and put this in context. So I've seen some criticism from people who have been responding in some ways to the show's anti-police rhetoric that we've talked about quite a bit. And one of the responses that they have is like, well, these police are, they're doing the right thing because these vigilantes, they're doing violence, and it's unsanctioned violence, and that kind of, well, if the vigilantes are doing violence, doesn't that make them, the same as the bad guys? Like, isn't Matt just like Fisk, right? That sort of rhetoric, especially with how much, I think especially where that might start to come from is the way that they frame those two action sequences together might be part of where that comes from. I'm not entirely sure. Like I understand the obvious parallels, and there is this sort of supposition I see, which is like, well, if a revolution or if a revolutionary figure is violent in some way, then it's like a morally compromised movement or a morally compromised kind of ideology. And the way that Fisk paints the vigilantes as kind of terrorists fits into that mold, when compared to the police. So I don't want to, again, strawman it. I just want to unpack the fact that there's a small amount of really loud people saying this. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of context here of how we might think about violence in revolution and ideology for no related reason to anything that's happening in the world, but you might find this useful. So here is Marx from Revolutionary Praxis. I'm just going to give you 2 passages, and then we can get out of here, go to break. Quote, another put down for armed struggle is to write it off as petite bourgeoisie terrorism, by presenting it as nothing more than an extreme expression of the frustrations felt by alienated intellectuals. Reference is often made to the Red Army faction in West Germany, and it is claimed that such actions are in fact counterproductive because they provide the state with an excuse for various repressive measures directed at the working class in general. Of course, it is true that isolated military actions by a few people who have no real base among the masses usually results in those perpetuating them ending up on the run and having to engage in armed robbery, etc., just to stay alive. That is why armed struggle is no good unless it is part of the more general revolutionary strategy of a revolutionary organization, which really does have at least some base among the working class. Yet another objection to armed struggle is to claim that it will alienate the masses. Is this in fact likely? Well, for a start, one recalls the widespread rejoicing when the IRA almost assassinated Thatcher in the Brighton bombing, and indeed the disappointment that they had not finished the job. Also, the more rebellious sections of the proletariat have no objection to taking up the gun. Revolutionary organizations often hold forth in their publications about overthrowing the bosses and smashing capitalism, and this appeals to some workers. However, when they realize that this is so much rhetoric, they quickly lose interest in revolutionary politics. The truth of it is that no organization will win strong support for revolutionary action among sections of the working class unless it does take up arms against the enemy, especially in defense of the class when it is under attack. And then he goes on to conclude. A final point often made against the armed struggle is the cost to be paid in injury and loss of life to the working class. We certainly must be under no illusion that the revolutionaries can have an easy victory if they take up the gun. Historical experience shows that the masses always suffer much heavier losses than did those they are oppressing, the ruling class and their functionaries. The price of revolutionary victory is very high, but what is often forgotten is that allowing capitalism to continue also exacts a heavy toll from the proletariat and other oppressed people. Quite apart from the miserable and degraded lives that many workers endure in Britain today, the issue has to be seen in a global context. The fact of the matter is that imperialist oppression and exploitation has brought about a situation where there are more poor people alive now than ever before in history. What is more, hundreds of millions of these people are actually becoming even poorer. They suffer degraded lives and die quietly, largely unnoticed by the rest of the world, precisely because most of them expire peacefully rather than violently in the course of revolutionary insurrection. The penalty for holding back from advancing revolutionary struggle to its highest level is to allow our enemies to continue without end their war against the poor. We've lost Patrick. The ideology was too extreme.
I was about to say.
Now, look, I'm not saying that I understand Scartapane's politics, and I won't pretend that like he's a socialist or a leftist or whatever, but the fact that the text is playing with the Trump illusions and all this stuff, I find this argument that I've been seeing about vigilantes aligning themselves with the police, I find that really insufficient. You know, it's a deeply bourgeoisie instinct and indelibly conservative, and I just want to put that in the air because I think where the show is going to land at the end will be kind of on, the side with Marx here, that like this vigilante violence is a necessary thing, and might even be like a good thing, even if no one wants violence. It might be something that has to happen, and if you don't fuck with Marx, I'll give you Kendrick Lamar, where he says, the noble person that goes to work and pray like they're supposed to slaughter people too, your murder's just a bit slower. There is something we have to do is resist the aesthetic arguments put forth by the kind of bourgeoisie capitalists who will tell you that revolutionary violence or violence in response to the state is bad and like somehow morally is going to damn you, while they choke you slowly without you knowing, is I guess the summation of Marx's argument there. So I just wanted to respond gently to some of those arguments I've seen online, put that out there, and this may be useful for us later on when we kind of see where the season lands, and how it makes a value judgment on the vigilantism that is a key part of this story. Certainly we know how the previous show lands on that. Yeah. Cool? Happy? Good?
Yeah.
All right.
I won't go with happy, but
Sorry. Do you have, let me rephrase, do you have anything else, or shall we take a quick break?
goodbye there. No, nothing.
What did you say, Pat?
I just said I think we should end on that. Also, you have the backup going, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you have the backup recording going?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because I dropped out of Discord just before and my Audacity also crashed.
This is the perfect recording session. Okay, well,
yes.
We're going to take a break, and we will be back in a minute. And hopefully Patrick will reboot his Audacity. We'll see what happens. Okay.
Woo.
Ads and then more show. We'll be back. If you like these handcrafted studies of genre fiction, please head over to ZeroIndent.com zeroindent.com or patreon.com/zeroindent if you'd like to consider supporting us. Even if you just give us a follow on Patreon, that helps us out. Leave a comment, a like, and if you're in a financial position to do so, you can support us and get access to early content, additional videos, director's commentaries, audio diaries, and all kinds of different things we have coming up. It really makes a difference helping keep independent media crit alive. Once again, that is zeroindent.com or patreon.com/zeroindent if you'd like to support us. Welcome back. We are talking about Daredevil Born Again episode 7, Art for Art's Sake, written by David Boyd, directed by David Boyd. I keep doing that. These 2 episodes are directed by David Boyd, and then this one's written by Jill Blankenship. Patrick, when you're ready, could we please hear the summary?
Fisk learns that Daredevil is back. Matt tries to deal with the fallout. Heather knows something is wrong, but meets him halfway. Later, Matt visits Angela in the hospital to gather information about Muse. She tells Matt he was obsessed with illustrations of faces. Meanwhile, Vanessa meets with Luca, and he pitches that the business world would be better if he were in charge again. Fisk zeroes in on Bastion Cooper as Muse, while Bastion visits Heather for a therapy session. And in a mirror of Fisk rifting through Benjamin Poindexter's life, we hear a laundry list of issues from Bastion's past. Bastion devolves in front of Heather and reveals himself to be Muse. Daredevil visits Muse's hideout, only to discover that Heather is a target. The world begins to collapse as Fisk learns that Heather has been taken by Muse, and very suddenly we're in a race to who can reach Heather first. Daredevil bursts into the office. He beats Muse, and Heather snatches the pistol and shoots Bastion in the chest multiple times, killing him. Fisk covers up Daredevil's involvement and produces a fiction that North and his team stopped Muse. Phoebe visits Daniel Blake and finally stands up for himself in his best Fisk impression. We end the episode with Vanessa making her first move to take over the business by trying to have Fisk killed. Buck kills Luca, and we are left to ponder the marital relationship of our favorite toxic couple. That's an interesting interpretation. That's not how I interpreted it.
Interesting. Yeah. I'm sure we'll get there. Yeah, because I also had the thought, like, maybe it's Fisk and Vanessa working together to take Luca off the board. Anyway, we'll get there. So Fisk does the classic, what do you see out this window? And it's so funny because you could tell this is like a thing he and Wesley probably did a lot. He's like, what do you see when you look out this window? Wesley would have been like, I see a city that's complicated and at odds with itself.
Yeah.
And
Wesley loves some poetic rhetoric.
Yeah. It would have been like, I believe it was Bates that wrote,
Yeah.
And then these fucking 2 douche goons are like, oh, I don't know, Starbucks, traffic. Oh, it's so funny. And Fisk says that he sees fear. I see fear. And, he learns that Daredevil is back, and he goes from this moment of saying that he sees fear to looking afraid, which is really interesting. Sometimes you just have to write the basic stuff well. There's a very simple, like, he says the word fear, and then he's scared. It's like, reversal. Very simple stuff, done well. I don't have a lot in this episode, just to be honest with you. There's really 3 big things that happen. Somehow this episode's longer than the previous one, even though less things happen. Very weird pacing of these 2. But they feel like they were shot together. I mean, this is part of how I broke it down when I was doing the breakdown of how we were going to watch this, is just by directors, because that's typically how these shows go, right? You get director for these 2, director for these 3, etc. The first big thing I really have is Angela. So yeah, Matt at home, he's showering, he's looking miserable. He's just a man who is upset with what's happened, upset with what he's done, and he's preparing himself. He's presumably preparing himself to lie to Heather. And this is, I'm just going to read you this note. Matt looks miserable showering. This is a man who is preparing to lie to the woman he loves. And then she gets in the shower with him. Are you fucking kidding me with this show? It's such a, like, like let's go, like let's go. Like this show just knows when to throw those punches. And this is the showering scene from the previews that we all called out, and we went, "Who's this strange woman that our Matthew Murdock is kissing?" After this, they're getting ready for the day, and she keys into the fact that he's lying, right? And something's off. He's checked out. He's like injured, and she does something really interesting to me personally from a writing perspective, which is she pulls out this analogy for like you're, I don't know, like you weren't here when I came back, like something's going on with you. Like, is this like some kind of self-harm? Which really aligns to some of the ways that me and Pat, we talked about Daredevil as sometimes being analogous to addiction in some capacity. And Heather seems to be pulling out that thread of behavior as well. And this is where perhaps, Darth, your question of asymmetry produced by a therapist in their relationship is the most present. And we actually get that called out in this scene, where Matt says, "This all feels to me like fake." And Heather kind of takes a beat and she says, "I'm sorry to do this,
but you have been tamping down trauma for so long. You can't even see when it's bubbling up inside of you and threatens to ruin everything good you have.
I know.
Everything good we have.
Yep. And I'm trying really hard to fight it.
It's not a fight. It's a process."
He says, "I love you, Matt." And Matt says, "I love you too." Just an oof of a scene. Really pregnant with meaning, this sequence. What do you guys make of this?
The way he says "I love you" back is like so not genuine. It's so uncomfortable, and there's so many. I really like this scene too. There's like a lot of. I feel like there's a lot of nuance. Like it's so telling how he describes dealing with trauma as a fight, and then Heather's like, no, it's not a fight. It's a process. Like it's the wrong way to look at it. And yeah, like it's so obvious that he's dealing with trauma. Like when Heather comes into the shower with him and he just like, he doesn't want to talk. So he just starts, lovemaking, which is just such an obvious trauma response. I think, the same thing happens in Breaking Bad after he sees Tuco beat that guy to death, and his trauma response is to initiate sex with Skylar. And she's like, whoa, what the hell's happening? I feel like there's a lot of emotional, like uncomfortable nuance in this scene.
Yeah, which made me think that it might be completely illegible to Darth. I don't know how this hit you.
Literally what I was about to say is it is so nuanced that the number of things that he could be thinking about, like top of my mind is that he almost saw someone very closely related to Hector die, and he very much, I think, feels responsible for Hector's death. And so he's sitting there in the shower thinking, I barely saved this kid's life. What do I have to do next? Or he could be thinking, I just betrayed this promise I made to Foggy where, like, when he died, I would never be Daredevil again. Or he could be thinking, I have to lie to this woman I love about where I was and how I got these bruises. So, like, this is where we have to have, like, this internal monologue to know what in the world is going on here, because it could be any of these things.
Yes, and this is where the multi-purpose scene work that this show mostly lacks is present, because it's all of those things, right? It's like Schrodinger's emotion. It's all of those things and it's none of those things. And in not giving voice to any one of those things in particular, the scene is allowed to do multiple things with these characters. And it's the kind of scene that we talk a lot about in the original run of Daredevil, where every time, I imagine if you were to rewatch this show, every time you rewatch this scene, you are going to think that Matt is thinking about something different each time. Depending on the place you are as a person when you come to that text, depending on the mood you're in, depending on how the show's working for you, you're going to engage and have a different reading of that scene and take something different from it. It's that type of scene. Daredevil is a show filled with scenes like that. This is a show that manages to do one of them every now and then. That's kind of my general feeling on on where this lands on the spectrum. But I mean, for me personally, I definitely read it as he is preparing to, this is my personal reading again, he's preparing to produce a fiction knowing that she'll know he's lying because is good at reading that stuff. And then he's sort of mentally going, how am I going to then do, like, how am I going to navigate that after she figures out I'm lying? And she does it for him. Do you know what I mean? Like, she kind of, I guess he's not expecting her to do that. Like, this isn't a Matt Karen argument where she's like, I know you're lying to me. Like, and he's like, well, I don't know what you want from me, Karen. And she's like, well, the fucking truth would be good. This isn't that, right? She's very accommodating. She really understands this is trauma response. This is someone who, the amount of understanding between these two people, or the amount of rope that Heather is willing to give Matt because of this trauma and these things he's gone through, it's such a different type of character than, you know, the women that Matt has been involved in previously. You think about Elektra, where that is a very much a toxic, impulsive relationship. It's very sexually charged, and it's a very dangerous relationship. Then you've got Karen, where it's a very loving relationship, but also one that is quite. It's infused with a lot of shared trauma, and there's a lot of complicated feelings there. And they are in some ways perfect for each other, but they're almost too perfect for each other. They're almost too similar sometimes. And then, you know, compared maybe perhaps with Claire, where, you know, that in that first season you get someone who is a caregiver who is sort of feels an obligation in some ways to Matt, and that ends up sort of blossoming into some kind of romantic involvement. But this is really the first time we've seen him in a relationship with someone who has the tools and the skill set to like deal with Matt Murdock, just to like, I don't know how else to just like describe it, but like, yeah, does that make sense? That's my reading on how this lands. That's sort of how I see it.
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. Like, yeah, the whole conceit of this season's Matt's girlfriend this season is like a therapist, you know, who can deal and unpack and, I don't know, like sort of maturely and sensibly respond to Matt's trauma and his like, you know, reticence to like open up and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know. It's something different. It fits in the themes of the show. I don't know. It just makes a lot of sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Especially given her interest in vigilantes and masks and stuff. There's a lot of it. The show feels like it's setting up that there's going to be the reveal to Heather that he's Daredevil, and it's not going to be a problem.
Mm.
Is that your vibe, or is it like that if she found out it would be bad? Like, I can't decide is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, I also feel like it could go either way, where she'd be like accepting, or she'd be like, I like the idea of vigilantes academically. I don't want to be too close to one emotionally. Like, that is like really unhealthy. Is maybe what would happen. Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah, sort of like yeah, she's like, well, I think in theory it's interesting and it's good to think about, but doing it is like, that's a bridge too far.
Yeah, and that's crossing a line. Yeah,
yeah, and that's kind of what I was sort of alluding to before with the way that Marx talks about like you know, the necessity of violence in revolution, right? Like there is a squeamishness to civilization around violence, but it's like the state's violence is so big and slow and invisible. It's like in Andor when, you know, Luthen's talking about you know, like we have to force them to close their fists tighter. We need people to realize they're being choked. And that's something that in you know, leftist groups that's called accelerationism. It's a big part of anarchism. It's a big part of why I'm not I respect anarchists, but that's just you know, insufficient to me as an ideology. But yeah, there's a squeamishness to the violence that Matt is doing and the sacrifice he has to make that I think how distressed she is by Muse and how that all breaks down and breaks bad does make you go, you know, is this the position they're in here before that encounter, and then after she's killed Muse, does that change the equation of how the reveal of Daredevil would go? Does she suddenly go, oh, actually, I get it. Like, I understand now. Someone has to protect. You sometimes have to do the wrong thing to protect, or do violence to protect people. You know, does that change the equation as well?
Mm.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah, it's so different from like Karen, for example. Superhero, you know, swooping in, saving you from the mugger in the street, and you swoon over how competent and athletic this guy is. Whereas for Heather, it's like super traumatic. You're kidnapped by a serial killer, about to die, about to have some other horrible things happen to you, and then a superhero comes in and saves you in the nick of time. But you still have to, you're still the one who also killed the serial killer, and so much trauma wrapped around this event of like, a superhero saving you kind of thing.
And not just a serial killer, but your patient, right?
Yeah.
Like how from her perspective, her failure of this person is catastrophic in its scale, right? Like that's the other thing is like professionally and existentially, this has to be, and you would do that rationalization of like, well, it's not my fault, like, but like, you have to imagine she's got to feel a type of way about that, given, it was a patient of hers.
Mm.
It's way worse than that though, because if you'll recall, he credits her book as the entire reason that he became Muse.
Yeah. Boy. This is she's not going to be a good place next episode, guys. I don't know what to tell you. Jesus, yeah, that is grim. I didn't put that together. I guess let's take this there.
But sorry, just on the flip side of that, maybe if she did find out he was Daredevil, that would offer, a light mirror image to Muse, where it's like, well, like, yes, your book did, through cause and effect, have this guy become this horrible person, but like, it's not everyone. There are people like me who are, trying to do good, and maybe it could put into perspective that her book was just incidental, that this guy turned out to be the way he was.
Yeah.
There's this show is conflating vigilantes and criminals in a way that I keep finding confusing, where they talk about them like anyone with a mask on is a vigilante, which is not the case. Like, Muse was a mass murderer. So the fact that she would ever compare him to Daredevil, who is known to save lives, makes absolute zero sense to me. It's like she is so fixated on the idea of the masks and what they represent that she can't differentiate like good and evil.
I don't think that's what Pat is suggesting. I think it's more that there's the willingness to go outside of the law and to put on these masks says something, and that having two people do that for such vastly different reasons and having a positive version of that in Daredevil, like, yeah, like, I don't think it's that literal, Darth, which I realize is an insufficient response for you, but like,
also like the social construct of a vigilante, I don't think runs that deep either. Like, it's just like, if you have a mask and a name, you have some sort of persona, like that is, that is a thing that is divorced from good and evil. And I think like that's probably like Heather's topic, rather than like, oh, vigilantes are explicitly good guys, and like, the serial killers don't fit into that mold kind of thing.
Right, but and Fisk wants to
makes
push him into the same category, right? He's doing that thing.
Yeah.
He's doing that thing that Marx talks about, which is like, you know, bundling it all into like petite bourgeoisie terrorism, right? Being like these like lone actors, these are terrorists, they're all the same. Like it benefits him to, like, he gets really lucky that Muse wears a mask, right? Like, this is a real stroke of luck for him that he's able to bundle all of this together. And I think that's part of why this show can feel at times very clicky or small, or I think Pat used the word contrived at the start. That's part of where I struggle. Like, it's cool and it's interesting, but it's also like, okay, but it's a little convenient that this guy happens to wear a mask and you know, like it. Yeah, I struggle with that a little bit.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's totally a result of that lack of dynamic range you're talking about at the beginning. Like, this show just doesn't have enough room to breathe.
Yeah, it feels like each episode needs about 20 or 30 more minutes of people talking and mulling stuff over. Yeah. So I guess let me take us there, because we probably want to talk about that melee. But Cherry, we do have some interstitials, you know, just after this Matt goes to work, and Cherry sort of, once again, to Darth's point, Matt blows off McDuffie and goes and talks to Cherry, and Cherry, in not so many words, tells Matt to fuck off, that he's not going to enable this self-destruction, and we get Fisk delivering his treatise on Daredevil to Buck, which I'm going to give you the dialogue, and then I'm interested to hear your guys' thoughts on whether we think that Fisk believes this, or if this is the fiction he's produced that justifies this, you know, that justifies his pursuit of vigilantes and justifies his categorization of vigilantes, or if this is some manipulation of some kind produced for Buck. So this is, you know, when he learns that he's talking about Daredevil, and he says, we're talking about a man who single-handedly destroyed 10 years of business infrastructure. You understand what I'm saying? And then Buck says, yes, sir. Fisk, 10 years I built that operation. It was totally fail-proof. Fail-proof until he had me unjustly arrested. He took down my entire business, one that made hard-working people who believed in themselves and my enterprise richer than they ever dreamed of. An entire network of blue-collar millionaires, from distributors overseas to the port workers here. Those people, they had grit. He went on a rampage. He tracked down all my workers, custom facilitators, all of them. Savagely beat them. He broke bones, broke spirits, without due process, without standing or legal cause, all because of this twisted, delusional man, this vigilante, because of his righteousness. What do we think? Does he believe this? What does this mean?
Yeah, I think this is absolutely his brand of like delusion and like lack of self-awareness. Everything he's describing is like something he like has done and would do, and like, you know, instead of savagely beating people, Fisk just kills them, kind of thing.
Yeah,
but yeah, and you know, he just thinks like, oh, you know, I was doing good. I was providing industry and enterprise, and you know, as he says, making millionaires of blue collar workers, which like, yeah, through bribes and coercion and blackmail. You mean like, yes, yeah, I suppose you were.
yeah,
yeah, and paying people to do violence and stuff like that. But I just love how I love hearing Fisk talk about the events of the Netflix series and how, and I especially love him describing like 10 years of infrastructure. Like, yeah, like there was a lot going on with Fisk, you know, when we first met him in season 1 of Daredevil, and like there's a lot left to the imagination there. Like, you know, how did he build this empire? He's at the top. He's colluding with like, you know, thousands of years old mystical people like Madame Gao. How did he get to that position? And that was, I like how him bringing that into reality, and through his frustration, like, yeah, I spent a decade building that shit, man. Like, yeah, I like hearing it.
Yeah. You gotta remember, like, by the end of that third season, like, he owns most of the FBI. Like, the amount of things he did, and the amount of, like, the long game he was playing, and how Matt was able to tear it down, really, like, is impressive. And you can tell that he still feels the type of way about it, Yeah. I also love the due process line. Like, says the man putting together a secret police who don't have to follow any laws. Like, okay, cool, man. Like, getting a bit fashy over here. Yeah. And the absolute audacity to say because of his righteousness while giving this speech about his own righteousness, it's like, brother.
Yeah.
Like, you just beat your wife's boyfriend to death in a basement. I don't know how much like
well, I gave him an axe, you see. So
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
Honorable.
It was self-defense. Yeah. It was honorable.
Yeah.
That's funny.
He gave him the axe.
It's good stuff.
And then I wrote, and then Buck goes, but you've moved on from that now, huh? You're the mayor now. And I wrote down, bro is trying to be Wesley so hard.
So hard he wants to be Wesley. Yeah. I mean, hey, he's earning his stripes, man. He's going to do something at the end of this episode where I was like, oh, what? Buck's got it like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's an interesting character. Again, you can imagine this show where you spend like 30 or 40 minutes with him across a couple episodes and really get to know him. Because what we do see is great.
He has a conversation with Vanessa where Vanessa talks about Wesley or something. Like, that'd be sick.
Yeah. You're a pale imitation of him,
Yeah.
Say that, and he could be like, well, they say that some of the greatest painters started by, copying others. Like, you can imagine that exchange being really charged and interesting and evocative.
And like, it you get some interiority of Buck where he goes silent and he goes, what am I to Fisk? Am I trying to be his lackey, or do I want to surpass him? Do I want to be something more? You could imagine something like that. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. Alas. Yeah. Darth, do you have anything on this little treatise that we get? Anything that's jumping out to you? Anything that you want to call out here?
No, I thought the self-delusion was really interesting, but your initial question was like, do we think that he believes this? And I don't think Fisk ever says anything that he doesn't believe. He speaks with intent all the time,
with ill intent.
So
yes,
I think he's convinced himself of the lie, I guess.
Yeah.
If that answers your initial question.
Yeah, it absolutely does, right? And this is him. This is a classic speech in praise of the villain moment where he's giving his worldview and he's like being like, "This is how I see the world," and of course it involves his lie and his ghost, right? His lie being that everything he says, and his ghost, of course, being Daredevil, and what Daredevil has done to him. We sort of go from there to there's two things that happen quickly, and then we can talk about what is going on with Bastion and the kidnapping, sort of how this episode resolves. But Luca meets up with Vanessa, and he sort of coyly pitches that he thinks it would be better. It was better when Vanessa was in charge. My note reads, "God damn it, Darth is right again. The business is coming between them." Fucking hell. It's like 3 in 1 recording session. And we sort of intuit that, she's thinking about it. And then we go to Bastion in therapy, who he tells her about this dream he has where he's given a bouquet of red balloons and a huge cake, but But when his parents call over for him, he's at a birthday party. His parents call over for him. No one can see him. They don't know he's there, right? And she goes, "What do you think that means?" And he goes, "I don't know." Now, the keen viewer might initially go, "Okay, well, it's just a story about like not being seen. Like it's not a complicated thing, right?" But yeah, I think it's attempting to be that kind of evocative character detail that we're familiar with in this sort of story, this sort of Daredevil story. I'm just not convinced by it necessarily. And as the scene spirals, I think I definitely buy in a lot more. But I just didn't. It didn't do a lot for me necessarily as an idea. I kind of wanted something a bit more flavorful. He of course does talk about taking Taekwondo. And he hated it. And then concurrently, as Fisk sort of goes through this list of stuff in this kid's life, you know, much less charged, much less deliberate, you know, imitation of the Dex stuff from season 3. You know, we learn that like after 3 months, you know, the Taekwondo teacher disappears and turns up dead somewhere. And that's sort of the trigger point for the therapy session going wrong.
Perhaps it's all a performance for Heather. He's warming up to the reveal that he's Muse, and so that story, you know, it isn't that deep, but he's just trying to hint to Heather, like, yeah, you know, that I wasn't seen because that wasn't my true self, kind of thing.
Sure, yeah.
And then later on, obviously, he draws the picture of Muse with the blood, and he goes, "That's my true self."
Yeah.
I also wondered if he might have been honestly asking her, because her book let him discover who he really was, and now he has this dream and he doesn't know what it means. So it also could make sense that he's just like, what if this is something else about me that I don't know? Will you tell me? And she didn't know either.
Right. Yeah, actually that is, I think that is actually what happens. Like he's actually like, you know, like what does it mean? Yeah. He has this the moment I know what's going wrong is when he sort of liltingly, he sits forward a little and he says, "I mean, all I ever wanted was to be an artist, to be the person I am now, and that's thanks to you." And Heather says, "Oh, that's kind of you to say, but I'm just the conduit." He goes, No, you're the key. I mean, don't you see that? I mean, you've unlocked something in me, Dr. Glenn. Something I didn't know was missing. I mean, you've allowed my creativity to flourish to sort of heights I never imagined. And then she's like, "Okay, let's talk about homework." And he goes, "No, you're not listening. The city is finally starting to see me for who I really am." And then she's like, "Yeah, you're bleeding." And that's when he does the thing. He's a very menacing character, and they've done a good job. They do a good job making him scary in this moment. The bit where this felt the most like, you know, like a manhunting style serial killer, you know, from the 70s and 80s is where he kind of goes, there's a beat where she's like, she looks at him and he says, "There's only one question on your mind. Can I make it to the door on time?" And then bang, you know, he grabs her as she goes to lunge. But, you know, it is some pretty keen serial killer writing, very much in that genre convention, and pretty confident at it too. Yeah, what do you guys make of this scene?
It's so similar to the that show I was talking about, The Patient. Like it's that kind of like relationship where the patient, aka the serial killer, like is clued into the fact that like the therapist is not engaging in the way that he wants him to, or like as in like that the killer knows that the therapist is just thinking about how to escape, or you know, they're just focused on their own well-being rather than actually doing the therapy. I agree. It was a really like competent scene.
Yeah. Becomes scary quickly, which I love that moment in the serial killer genre where it goes from like normal conversation to like, oh shit, like this is going wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I like how Heather's trying to like change the subject, like just hide the fact that she knows and stuff. Yeah, very tense.
Right. And this is where the editing problem really reared its head for me, though, is like it's very eager to move on from this in a way that just like, because then we go from this to Fisk, and it feels like we needed another 2 or 3 minutes of him, you know, you could imagine in a different show, right? You get him standing there over her body, and he's like shivering with anticipation, and you see him go through the ritual of like becoming Muse. Do you know what I mean? Like, and you would have to sit in that discomfort. And I'm not just saying that because I love when Gilroy just shows you a guy getting dressed or someone getting dressed in the morning, but that is like a really effective way, especially for a character like this. How does he put on the mask? What are his little rituals? How does he put on the outfit? Because it seems really homemade and stitched together and sort of stapled together. Like, how does he put it on? You know, those are that, you know, you could show him becoming Muse, or, you know what I mean? And I realize we get some of that in the scene of him devolving, but I would have loved to spend more time there before moving on to him being caught.
Mm.
Again, a different version of the show would have an entire episode where she's captured and they have to have the conversation where she's captured. And that would be, as you say, Pat, like that show that you were talking about, The Patient.
Yeah. And then it would cut back to like Matt, and he would have to, the whole episode would be him investigating and like trying to find out, like, you know, I guess in this scenario, like they would be somewhere else, not her office, but like, yeah, Matt like frantically going like, where, you know, solving the mystery essentially. Where is he? Where did he take her?
Right. But instead he goes to the lair and knows. This is a drawing of Heather, which is interesting. The idea of, you know, he might be drawing his victims beforehand, or he's just that fixated on her type of thing. Yeah.
I just had a really funny thought that Matt makes the ID by feeling the pictures, and then he recognizes her face, and we get a like beautiful quick flashback to when he runs his hand over her face, so we understand what's happening. I so appreciated that, because like I didn't need it, but I like that was for people like me. And then the cop comes in and sees him, and Matt knocks him out, and he only, I guess we don't fully know the time frame, but it seems like there's only a few minutes that pass between when Daredevil defeats Muse and when the cops show up. So if Matt had not knocked out the cop, if he had just said, hey, this is the next target, it's Heather, this is her address, call it in now, or the murderer is going to get her, and he immediately calls it in, and then the cops get there, like, he actively worked against the people that, yes, they're like secret SS, but they're also still the cops that are trying to stop the murderer, and he actively worked against them.
Darth, come on, dude. Like, the entire season, the entire season is like, you cannot trust these guys. You can't trust them. I understand what you're saying, but you can't, like, the risk is too great to have the safety to get the cops involved. These guys with fucking assault rifles and shit, like, are you kidding me? Like, there's no way.
Their priority is to stop Muse, not save the hostage. I feel. Yeah.
They'd probably shoot the hostage just to make it easier to get to him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. The other thought I haven't been able to get past is I don't understand the why of Muse at this point. I'm assuming that he wanted to use her blood to draw her portrait on this huge canvas and then hang it out the window or something.
Well, so it looks like he was, as that guy says later on, it was like a murder-suicide grand plan. That seems to be true, because he knew, you know, he was Daredevil discovered it and his time was up, and he wanted to go out with this grand piece. And what that grand piece was involved perhaps some unconsensual assault type stuff. Because there's a shot where he like grabs her thigh just before Daredevil comes in.
Oh yeah.
Typical like serial killer stuff, but yeah, it was going to be a piece about, I don't know, struggle and torture and abuse. Yeah.
He sort of he seems to delight in cutting on her, and then she's just kind of like squirming, begging him not to do this. And that's, as you say, that's when he sort of caresses her thigh, and it's just like skin crawling to watch. And yeah, he busts in at the last second. And I thought, this is my note says, oh, it's going to be Daredevil versus the bad guy versus the cops. This is like a familiar story. This is always really cool when this happens. Not the case at all. Matt and Muse square up. But yeah, I think the why is like, it's working in the serial killer genre in such a way that it doesn't feel the necessity to produce that why coherently. It just lets it be like, you get it. It's serial killer fiction. I'm not saying that's sufficient. I'm just saying that's what it happens from, in the actual thing. So I completely understand what you're saying, Darth. I don't know that it's super clear, but also I don't know that it needs to be for the scene to evoke the feelings it needs to evoke, right? The desperation, the terror. Again, though, you could imagine the entire episode of TV exploring that why and exploring this character and why he's doing this and, all that sort of thing. The fighting itself...
Well, the easiest solve would have just been during the fight itself that Muse is constantly screaming, like, you didn't give me time to finish. Like, I have to finish this masterpiece. Something like that. And then, not that it needs it, because...
Yeah. Like, you're ruining it.
I can accept... Yeah. I'm like, I can accept the crazy guy just needed to kill because he's crazy, but I dislike that, because that's just too simplistic, and people usually aren't that simplistic. There's usually a reason for something. So
there is a line where like he hears the cop sirens and he goes, "No, not yet. I need more time," or something like that.
He does. Yeah.
Yeah, but I also don't like. Was he going to bleed her and take the blood with him? Like there were so many questions of what he could be potentially doing. So.
Right.
Yeah. I think the missed trick here is like he should have been trying to take her somewhere else. Like I think that would solve this because it should be much more clear. Yeah. The fight itself, I thought was really fun and interesting and dynamic. It's the most, in my opinion, it's the most OG Daredevil fight we've seen in a while. There's a moment that I like yelped where, Muse manages to kind of judo toss or taekwondo. He pushes Matt away from him violently, and then Muse goes for Heather, and Matt he lunges with the grapple, and he with the billy club, and he grapples through Muse's shoulder, and I was like, ugh! Like it was like a real shocking bit of violence, and I was like, that's a cool use of the billy club, to like grapple through this dude's shoulder, and then he just like yanks him back, and it looks so painful.
Yeah, I was wondering what that was, because I was like something pierced somewhere in his body. I'm not sure what or where. I thought like he may have like thrown his knife, or like the wire wrapped around his chest like a garrote wire and like sunk into his skin or something. I wasn't super clear on what happened there.
Yeah. So it was the kind of gas powered grapple that he has, and he sort of grapples it through like the collar area, like by the shoulder.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's a very cool shot, and it's like a very you can feel the desperation. Like this is not. He's like, I just have to do something right now, or this is gonna, it's Heather, right? There's a desperation to Matt's fighting that I think is communicated really well with the choreography. Yeah, he's not doing as many flips. He is just trying to beat this guy. Like, yeah, he's sort of, and this is something they do well with this character or they had done previously in the previous seasons, which is when he locks into the boxing mode. That's when he's desperate. He's just trying to do damage. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Darth, what do you think? What's Resident Action Guru? What's your take of this fight?
No, I loved it. I want to give the first one a watch again, and then this fight a watch again. But after hearing the the bit about the Taekwondo, I was like, oh, the fact that this is such an even fight now feels so much more earned. Aside from the fact that he only studied with the Grand Master for 3 months, it should have been way longer. But I'm gonna let that slide. It's okay. Let it go.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that didn't occur to me till you just said it. 3 months is a short amount of time. Although you don't know if he's been doing Taekwondo for 10 years before that, and they get the master and he's only there for 3. You know what I mean? Like, I could make that work in my head. Yeah.
Maybe he beat the Taekwondo master in only 3 months. That's why he's dead.
That's
He was
some
a
Bruce
real
Wayne shit.
prodigy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like to go to the temple and like, best the masters or whatever. So that's yeah, that motherfucker would be played by Liam Neeson in the flashback. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The will to act. Sweet. Now Fisk is Fisk takes credit for. Well, actually, sorry, we should say how it resolves. So they have this exchange, and Matt is like mid-fight. He seems like he's got the upper hand, and then Heather just shoots Muse in the chest like 4 times. In all caps, my notes just read, "What the fuck?" It's so sudden. Like it goes from a Daredevil fight to just like bang, 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 and then he's dead, and it's like, the fuck? Like it is the editing there is really well paced, where it's so sudden the explosion of the gunfire.
Yeah, and Matt's in the same reaction too. He's like, "Whoa!" It's like I had this.
yeah. He's like, I'm locked in, dude. This also proves that Matt can only be romantically interested in women who have killed someone. Elektra, Karen, Heather. It just, I mean, he loves a killer. I don't know what to tell you.
To be fair, we don't know that this is the first time she's shot someone.
You think this comes up a lot in therapy as a line of work?
Yeah.
next episode, he's like, babe, you must be so traumatized. And she's like, nah, that was like number 27, dude. This happens to me all the time. In case anyone out there missed the reference, that's referring back to Karen when she kills Wesley. And she's like, you think I've never shot anyone before?
No, she says, you think I've never killed anyone before?
Yeah, but she didn't, though. Yeah, I have a big problem with that.
Listen.
She shot someone. She did not kill anyone. It was a car wreck. It's not her fault.
No, she does say, you think I've never shot anyone before.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
I guess she was running with that drug dealer dude. Like, I'm sure that... Wait, didn't she shoot the boyfriend? In that episode?
Yeah, but she just winged him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
not fatally.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so the line makes sense then. I don't know why we're quibbling over this. We all agree. Karen, objectively cool character. Yeah. Anyway, dumb jokes aside, Fisk takes credit for this, and he tells North, like, well, because North is like, hey, like, this as Pat said before, it's some murder suicide thing, and Daredevil stopped him. Fisk goes, oh well, I'm sure it was great work that you and your men did, exemplary, in taking down this dude. And what is interesting is that Fisk looks like he isn't sure if Daredevil killed Muse or not. Like, he sort of, there's a way that D'Onofrio reacts to this conversation with North where it might be unclear in Fisk's head, like, did Daredevil kill this dude?
I never thought about that. Yeah, that's interesting. Because then he would be second guessing about actually going after him if Daredevil has now crossed the line that he was not willing to cross before. Like the last time that they saw each other, like, wasn't Matt yelling in his face? Well, I guess it wasn't the last time, but when they fought and he was yelling in his face, you don't get to decide who I am and blah blah blah.
Yeah, I beat you. This city beat you. you know. Yeah, I only thought of that because of the fear line at the start. You know. Let's see if I have it. Hold on.
I'm staring and waiting for Ernie to say something because his mouth was open.
This is Matt to Fisk.
Oh no, he
Go, Pat. Do a joke.
no,
What do you got?
I was just saying, I can't even remember what I was going to say. Something about like drooling, zoning out or something.
Yeah, that's for puppets. Classic puppet behavior. So yeah, this is that exchange. So Matt to Fisk. God knows I want to, but you don't get to destroy who I am. You will go back to prison and you will live the rest of your miserable life in a cage, knowing you'll never have Vanessa. That this city rejected you. It beat you. I beat you. You'll keep my secret and you won't harm Karen Page or Foggy Nelson or anyone else. Because if you do, I will go after your wife, and I will prove Vanessa ordered the murder of Agent Ray Nadeem, and like her husband, she'll spend the rest of her life in a cell. That is his sort of his threat and his promise at the end of that exchange in season 3. But yes, it did make me go, hey, is Fisk maybe starting to worry that he's miscalculated about Matt? You know, what has Foggy's death done to change this guy, and has Fisk maybe underestimated how much it's changed him? Yeah. 2 last things then before we wrap up. Blake, this fucking guy. Daniel Blake brings in BB Urich to pressure her into lying about Daredevil's involvement and saying that it was the task force. And he does... It's really great acting from this guy. He literally does like a Fisk cosplay impression where he's sitting at Fisk's desk, he's drinking from Fisk's whiskey, and he does his sort of best Fisk patois as he provides this threat. Because she's sort of like, is that a threat? And he's like, no, I just think you have a really bright future, and, you know, I would just hate for that I would hate for that to go wrong, and like I just want to look out for you. And he tries to do the Fisk patter. And it's a really choice writing and really great acting that just makes him seem this show does a really great job of making this guy seem really small but very earnest. It's very bizarre characterization, and it's part of why I love hating him. It's part of that maneuver for me. I'm just constantly impressed whenever they have him do this stuff.
He would fit well in a show like Succession, where you love him because he hasn't had a chance to be evil yet. But he, you know, it's like he kind of reminds me of Greg from Succession, like the young guy, where you kind of like see the potential for a lot of evil in him, but like he just hasn't had the opportunities to go down that path. And this is like he's like, oh yes, I can finally be the kingpin.
Right. Yeah, he's sort of he's like Dedra in season 1 of Andor, you know, in the lead up, which he's like initially you're like, wow, like girl boss, like gatekeep, like fucking like this is all, and then she goes full mask off fascist, and you're like, oh no, like how did this happen? I feel like Daniel Blake is that type of character.
Is she the like the blonde Imperial officer? Yeah. I need to rewatch that show. Yeah, because she is a great character.
Because you want her to win those exchanges, and you're like, yeah, she is really good at her job, and everyone around her is wrong, and then you're like, wait, I wish she was worse at her job.
It was like she's so determined because she is such a fascist.
It's so good, and that disastrous moment at the end between her and Khan. She's just like trembling. That show rules. Anyway, Heather, hey, here's a question I have, because I don't know the answer in and of myself. First of all, be good, be kind to yourself, rewatch Andor. Season 2 is coming out very soon. Season 2 will be out by the time this episode comes out. The first 3 episodes of season 2 will have been out for 5 days by the time this episode, because of how time works, by the time you're hearing this. And if you like this show, you should be watching fucking Andor, okay? Go watch Andor.
This is like this is David's Christmas.
It's my yes, it's my Christmas. It's literally the lead up to my Christmas, right? I get Andor. I get to bathe in Andor for the next couple weeks, and then I'm in Europe for a month, right? Like I'm just living my dream at the moment. I'm living my best life. But yes,
You love to see it.
I'm excited. We might do something Patreon for Andor season 2. I don't know what. Something bonus. Probably do an end of season wrap up. I know we want to do an end of season wrap up for The Last of Us season 2 when that season wraps up. I know that obviously Sam and Samuel, combine their names. Sam and Danielle will have thoughts about that. And I'm sure that we will as well. And then I definitely want to do something about Andor, but I just don't know what. It is a type of show that I love watching. I try not to engage with it in the same mode, so it might just be like an end of season wrap up or something. Anyway, last two things we get. Do you think, because Heather remembers that Daredevil knew her name, do you think she's starting to put it together or not? Are we not there yet? What's your vibe?
I think yes, I mean, now that you say it, I feel like it probably is a setup for a realization to happen.
Darth shook his head. He's not buying it.
Nope.
Okay.
I mean, you're drugged up. She was bleeding out. She, like, after she shot Muse, she immediately fell over, unconscious. And then she wakes up in the hospital bed and she's drugged and she's like, I think that guy said my name.
Why did you make her Southern?
Yeah, she also all of a sudden got a Southern accent.
Well, I don't know, Mr. Murdoch.
When you're drugged up, you turn into a Louisiana resident. That's just how it works.
I saw him down on the bayou. He was wearing a red cut. It's funny how Southern for me becomes Christopher Walken really quickly. He was wearing red armor and he fought that guy and he said my name. What does that mean?
Okay, we need to do a whole podcast with that voice. That's awesome.
Whenever I try to do a Southern accent, it's that lawyer chicken from Futurama. Your Honor, my client.
I say.
Excuse me.
So the last thing that happens in this episode is Vanessa. Okay, I need to hear what you guys think about this because I have two ways of reading this. Vanessa texts Luca Fisk's location and says he's alone. And Luca turns up with designs on killing Fisk, and Buck just boop shoots it. It doesn't sound like boop. He shoots him with a silenced pistol and kills him immediately. Here's the question I have for both of you. Is this Vanessa trying to kill Fisk, or is this Vanessa setting up Luca to be killed?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it is left ambiguous, but I think it's Vanessa coordinating with Fisk to remove Luca. Because throughout these last two episodes, they've been like really candid and open with each other. And I feel like they are making progress on their relationship, which is why I think that this is a coordinated effort.
So when she and Luca talked out on the dock, I was ecstatic. I was like, I was right. And then she texts him now with the address, and she's looking like she's all alone. She's at the head of the table as the camera dollies back, and she puts the phone down and she's all sad. And I'm like, I was right. She just got she's trying to have her husband killed so she could take over the business. And then Luca's walking up with the gun, and I'm like, I was right. And then, but Fisk says, would you call my wife and see if she wants some of the blah, 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 blah. And the way that he says that made it sound to me like, I know you just tried to have me killed and I'm bringing home dinner for you. That's how I read that.
Interesting. Yeah, okay. Damn, I buy both. Both are really credible.
Yeah, I took that as like him asking Vanessa if that like it's just like a job well done kind of thing. Like, hey, like you like a friendly, man and wife. Like, hey, honey, do you want me to bring you home dinner? Kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Huh.
But actually, with Darth, now that you mentioned that imagery of Vanessa at the head of the table, I can see that. I can see how that could be something.
Yeah. It's also, I think it's it visually, the location he's in seems like a bit of a callback to the first date they have where he like pays the restaurant to be completely cleared out. Like it's got that same like white tablecloth aesthetic, that same kind of vibe sort of thing. And so you have to wonder like, but he's there without her type of thing. Like you could make something of that as well.
Well, it was very mafia mob boss reminiscent to me.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's some Goodfellas shit for sure. Like some Godfather nonsense. Like, the Don sitting at the table in the empty restaurant, eating. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very Sopranos.
Very Sopranos. There's some Tony shit. Yeah. I'm sorry. This is some things. This is some shit that Tony would aspire to.
I did clock it as odd that he was sitting with his back to the door, because that's a very unsafe thing to do unless you're intentionally making yourself a target.
It's a good point.
If I was Fisk, I'd be sweating so much. Like, oh man, what if Buck misses? What if Luca just shoots me before he goes past that little section? He's having a lot of faith that things will play out exactly right.
Well, his suits are bulletproof, so there's that.
True, his head isn't though.
I don't know that they are anymore.
He's been shot there before. It doesn't matter.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Apparently his head is bulletproof.
Yeah, true. I mean, my feeling is that he's wearing normal clothes now. Like, because you get that with the, like, my suits don't feel like they used to. I'm assuming he's just wearing normal-ass clothes. Because Potter's fully dead, right? Potter gets got in season 2?
Daredevil's got a new suit?
Potter's dead? No, he's not.
Isn't he? I'm pretty sure someone
he was
posted
in season
that.
3.
I'm pretty sure someone posted that in the in a comment when we were talking about that. I was fairly sure he died.
In season 3, because he goes to Potter, he's like, "You made this new Daredevil suit, didn't you, for Dex?"
Right.
And then they have a scrap, and then he leaves Potter to be like arrested by the FBI or whatever. And I think that's the last we see of him.
Yeah, that might be right. He gets taken into custody. That might be how that goes down.
Yeah.
Or is Matt getting all of his stuff made by the whoever it is in the She-Hulk show?
I don't know.
Because we see his gold helmet in there, like she sees the gold helmet, so we know that person made it for Matt. So are they making all his stuff?
Yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. I hadn't put that together. I guess the show isn't that interested in where this stuff comes from necessarily, but yes, I think you're right. It does feel like a missed trick. Like, again, you can imagine you can imagine a much more taut version of this where Matt decides to be Daredevil again, but he has to go through the friction of getting a new suit. And like every step of the way, he knows he's doing the wrong thing, but he does it anyway. You can imagine that type of vibe.
Yeah.
A real slippery slope.
It's like a crack addict that's he's trying to find the drug again, and he's like, "Can you make me a helmet?
Can you make the horns a little bigger?"
Because I kind of thought that that's where they were going, because he only had the one horn left. So I thought he was gonna like show up at someone's workshop, like their armory, and be like, "Make me a new one" or whatever. I sort of thought maybe that would be Sherry's role. Like, I don't know. Because they kind of present Sherry as like this sort of Alfred type, but then he's not that at all. That's very, missed opportunity, I feel. But here's an important question. What color would you make your Daredevil suit?
Black.
Yeah, black is cool.
Fucking
Black with the red eyes. I fuck
Goth
with that.
kids.
Isn't that one of his suits?
That is one of them. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But also like a silver one would be cool.
Ooh, silver. That'd be cool. Not very
Yeah.
stealthy, but cool.
That's what I was.
Yeah.
I would
Yeah, just a blinged out suit.
I would do like, you know, how, like
Rhinestones.
people get like their cars, and it's illegal, but they get their cars wrapped in like chrome. I would do a chrome suit because they'd never be able to pick you out from the reflections of the city at night. You know what I mean? And yeah, they would be pretty shiny in the day. Like you couldn't wear that shit out, but like just fully chromed out, that'd be a sick look. You know?
Oh, it'd be an advantage during the day. You'd blind your opponents.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah. You might get pulled over though by the cops. You might be like, hey, this is an illegal wrap. So, that's funny. Of course, Darth went for black. That tracks. Fucking Star Wars pilled. Now, okay. That's everything I've got. You guys got anything else? Should we wrap up there?
No, that's all I have.
Okay. Well, next time we are talking about Daredevil Born Again episode 8, just the one episode, and then we will have, then our sort of finale will be on episode 9. I've done this on purpose because the show separated those episodes like that on purpose as well from a production perspective. So I imagine next episode might be a bit shorter. That will do it for us. As always, Darth, what have you got coming up? Anything you want to plug?
No, let me retire first, and then.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna keep shaming you though. I'm gonna keep shaming you.
I know.
And Ernie, if people want to find more of what you do on the internet, where can they find you?
Oh, well, I have a podcast with my friend Bert. It's called A Method to the Madness. Find us on Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. We have a website, AMTTM.com. Find all our episodes and socials from there.
Linked in the show notes as well. I thought you were you burst into the like Sesame Street because that song is like we're gonna find them at Sesame, but I don't know the song enough to know. Like anyway, I just know that that's the hook in is like find me when I get to Sesame Street. Anyway, if you've made it this far, you know what it is. ZeroIndent.com for everything we do. Patreon.com to support us and keep independent media criticism alive. These shows take a lot of time and energy to put together. If you're in a financial position to do so, we really appreciate it. It helps us out, and you get access to over 10 years of archive Patreon exclusive content, as well as our ongoing Zero Indent Patreon bonus episodes. You can find the discussion me and Darth had last weekend about duplicates and clones and infections and metros. It was a great chat. And the next kind of Patreon bonus thing will be us talking about 2 of Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who episodes, the Empty Child dual arc in season 1. We haven't recorded that yet, but I'm sure it'll be a great discussion. I've roped Mitchie in because he's the other Doctor Who pilled person in our network. Outside of that, if you want to get
we've also discussed Severance, if you like that. That's
Severance,
on Patreon. Severance
season 2. You can get around it. It was not our deepest discussion of all time, but it was a really fun one. And if you want to get something for your money physically, you can go to underink.press to find all of my books and find all of the merch. You can also get the Daredevil and Details tee over there to help support the show. Otherwise, if you're not in a financial position to do so, which honestly we completely understand, have you seen the state of the world? One thing you can do for free is to leave us a rating or a review or a comment on your podcast catcher of choice and send the show to one person you think might like it. You know, you might listen to this and be like, my dad would love this. He's a fucking nerd. You know what I mean? Send this to a nerd in your life. Send this to someone who you think might appreciate it. It's the only way that the shows and the network grows. We don't do any advertising ourselves. And I don't make you listen to any stupid ads in the middle about like the military or Oreos or whatever. That'll do it for this episode. We appreciate any support you guys give us. We will see you next time. And as we always say at the end, it was not entirely unpleasant to see you again. If you like these handcrafted studies of genre fiction, please head over to ZeroIndent.com or patreon.com/ZeroIndent if you'd like to consider supporting us. Even if you just give us a follow on Patreon, that helps us out. Leave a comment, a like, and if you're in a financial position to do so, you can support us and get access to early content, additional videos, director's commentaries, audio diaries, and all kinds of different things we have coming up. It really makes a difference helping keep independent media crit alive. Once again, that is zeroindent.com or patreon.com/zeroindent if you'd like to support us.